Imagine history not as a story, but as a signal, faint, fragmented, and still transmitting. Not everything from the past is gone. Some of it is still here, repeating in patterns we don't fully understand, hiding in designs that feel too precise to be accidental. It's not loud. It doesn't explain itself. But it persists, and the strange part is, the more we advance, the more these ancient traces begin to make sense in ways they shouldn't, as if they were never meant for the people who created them, but for those who had come much later, for us. And that's when the mystery shifts into something deeper. What if the past isn't something we're uncovering, but something that has been quietly waiting for us to catch up? The Code of Hammurabi stands as one of the most remarkable artifacts of ancient civilization, a massive stone monument that reveals not only the legal thinking of early Mesopotamian society, but also raises profound questions about the technological capabilities of the ancient world. Commissioned by Hammurabi, the powerful ruler of the city of Babylon, around approximately 1754 BCE, this famous law code was carved into a towering black basalt stele that stands about 2.25 meters tall and weighs several tons. The monument contains 282 laws written in the wedge-shaped writing system known as cuneiform, used widely across the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. Today the stele is preserved in the Louvre Museum, but the artifact continues to fascinate archaeologists, historians, and engineers alike because of several unusual features that appear far more sophisticated than many people expect from a civilization nearly 4,000 years old. One of the most striking mysteries surrounding the Code of Hammurabi is the extraordinary precision of the cuneiform inscriptions carved directly into extremely hard basalt stone. Basalt is a volcanic rock formed from rapidly cooled lava and ranks around 6 on the Mohs hardness scale, making it significantly harder than limestone or sandstone, the materials most commonly used in ancient inscriptions. Despite this hardness, the entire surface of the stele is covered with thousands of carefully carved characters that maintain an almost perfectly consistent depth and spacing. Scholars estimate that the monument contains more than 3,600 individual lines of text, arranged in orderly vertical columns that wrap around the cylindrical surface of the stone. Each symbol appears cleanly incised with sharp angles and remarkably uniform proportions. Even modern stone engravers working with steel chisels and power tools acknowledge that carving thousands of precise characters into basalt is a slow and demanding process, which raises an intriguing question. How did ancient Babylonian artisans accomplish this task using Bronze Age tools? Excavations and historical research suggest that the craftsmen responsible for the monument likely used bronze chisels or copper tools hardened with arsenic or tin. However, experimental archaeology has shown that copper-based tools dull quickly when used against basalt. In several modern experiments conducted by researchers attempting to replicate Mesopotamian stone carving methods, bronze chisels required constant sharpening after only a small number of strikes. If the same methods were used for the Code of Hammurabi, the craftsmen would have needed enormous patience and technical skill to maintain the uniformity seen on the stele. Furthermore, the spacing between the lines of text is extremely consistent across the entire monument. This suggests that the artisans followed a carefully planned layout system before beginning the carving. Yet when scientists closely examined the surface of the stele using high-resolution photography and scanning methods, they found almost no visible guidelines or preliminary markings, leaving open the mystery of how such a precise layout was achieved. The precision becomes even more impressive when compared with other inscriptions from the same era. Many Mesopotamian clay tablets, for example, were written by pressing reed styluses into soft clay before baking the tablets in kilns. These tablets often contain irregular spacing and small mistakes that scribes corrected during writing. In contrast, the Code of Hammurabi is carved into unforgiving stone, where errors would be extremely difficult to correct. Yet the monument shows remarkably few corrections or irregularities, suggesting either extraordinary planning or an incredibly skilled team of craftsmen capable of maintaining near-perfect accuracy over thousands of characters. Some researchers have proposed that scribes first prepared the entire text on clay tablets and then transferred the layout onto the stone before carving. Others believe that the monument might have been worked on by specialized master engravers who possessed advanced knowledge of stone carving techniques that have not been fully documented. Another fascinating element of the stele is the finely sculpted relief at its top, depicting King Hammurabi standing before the sun god Shamash, the deity associated with justice and divine authority. The relief demonstrates a high level of artistic sophistication. The folds of the king's robes, the rays of light surrounding the god, and the intricate details of hair and beard are all carved with remarkable clarity. This artistic scene sits directly above the long columns of legal text, and symbolically showing that the laws were believed to originate from divine authority. The relief also reveals another aspect of ancient technological skill. The surface of the basalt has been polished to a smooth finish before carving, indicating that the artisans possessed effective techniques for shaping and smoothing extremely hard stone. Archaeological history adds another layer of mystery to the monument. The stele was not discovered in Babylon itself, but in the ancient city of Susa during an archaeological expedition in 1901 led by French researchers working in the region. Historical records indicate that centuries after Hammurabi's reign, the monument was taken as war booty by the kings of the Elamite civilization and transported hundreds of kilometers to Susa. Moving such a heavy basalt pillar across long distances would have required coordinated logistics, possibly involving sledges, river transport, or large groups of workers. Curiously, part of the text on the lower section of the stele was deliberately erased by the Elamites, apparently to make space for their own inscriptions. However, the replacement text was never carved, leaving a blank section that still puzzles historians today. Beyond the technical aspects of carving and transport, the content of the laws themselves reveals a surprisingly complex legal system. The Code of Hammurabi regulates everything from property disputes and trade contracts to medical responsibilities and building safety. One famous rule states that if a builder constructs a house that collapses and causes the death of the owner, yet the builder himself must face death as punishment. Another law addresses surgical procedures, establishing both rewards and penalties for physicians depending on the success or failure of their operations. These examples demonstrate that the society of ancient Babylon had already developed a structured legal framework that governed professional responsibility, economic activity, and social order. Overall, this monument is not only a legal document but also a remarkable technological and artistic achievement of ancient Babylon. The precision of the cuneiform inscriptions carved into hard basalt reveals an extremely high level of craftsmanship. Even after more than a century of study, the Code of Hammurabi still raises many questions about the technology and engineering capabilities of ancient civilizations. Where are you watching this video from, and what time of day is it for you? Share your location and time in the comments below. The Behistun inscription is widely regarded as one of the most extraordinary archaeological monuments of the ancient world. Carved into a towering limestone cliff along the ancient royal road in western Iran, the inscription was commissioned around 520 BCE by the Persian king Darius I. ruler of the vast Achaemenid Empire. Rising roughly 100 meters above the valley floor, the monument stretches across a rock surface approximately 15 meters wide and 25 meters high, making it both a historical record and a monumental engineering achievement. While the inscription primarily recounts Darius's rise to power and the suppression of multiple rebellions across the empire, its true significance goes far beyond the historical narrative. The Behistun inscription represents a technological and linguistic marvel, containing thousands of precisely carved cuneiform characters written in 3 languages: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian Akkadian. The scale, accuracy, and placement of this monumental text raise profound questions about the technological capabilities of ancient craftsmen more than 2,500 years ago. One of the most astonishing aspects of the Behistun inscription is its seemingly impossible location. The carvings are positioned high on a sheer cliff face that would have been extremely difficult to access even with modern climbing equipment. Ancient engineers likely constructed elaborate wooden scaffolding to reach the surface, yet no direct archaeological evidence of these structures survives. Some historians propose that after the inscription was completed, the Persians intentionally removed the access routes to prevent vandalism or alteration. If true, this suggests a remarkable level of planning. The monument was designed not for easy human reading, but as a permanent imperial proclamation visible from the trade routes below. Travellers along the royal road would see the immense relief of Darius standing triumphantly above his defeated enemies, a symbolic message of authority carved into the landscape itself. The logistical challenge alone, transporting tools, workers, and possibly hundreds of kilograms of equipment up the cliff, demonstrates organizational capabilities comparable to large imperial construction projects elsewhere in the ancient world. Yet the most extraordinary technological mystery of the Behistun inscription lies in the precision of its cuneiform writing. The monument contains roughly 1,200 lines of text and thousands upon thousands of individual wedge-shaped characters carved directly into solid limestone. Despite being created on an uneven vertical rock surface, the characters appear remarkably consistent in size, spacing, and alignment. In many sections, the rows of text remain straight and evenly proportioned across several meters of stone, suggesting that the ancient artisans followed some form of geometric layout system or measurement grid. This level of precision is striking when compared to other ancient inscriptions. For example, the famous Rosetta stone, carved more than 2 centuries later in Egypt, yet contains carefully arranged hieroglyphic and Greek text. Yet, it was engraved on a manageable stone slab placed horizontally during carving. In contrast, the Behistun text was executed on a vertical cliff face, exposed to wind, erosion, and extreme working conditions. The challenge would have been comparable to carving a multi-page manuscript into the side of a mountain while suspended high above the ground. Even more remarkable is the trilingual nature of the inscription. Each section communicates the same historical narrative in 3 distinct writing systems, allowing the message to be understood across the vast territories of the Achaemenid Empire. Old Persian used a relatively simplified form of cuneiform, while Elamite and Babylonian Akkadian employed far more complex sign systems derived from earlier Mesopotamian traditions. The decision to present the text in 3 languages suggests a highly organized imperial bureaucracy capable of coordinating translators, scribes, and stone carvers simultaneously. It also implies that drafts of the text must have existed before the carving began, likely prepared on clay tablets or parchment scrolls. Some researchers believe the artisans may have first painted guidelines onto the rock surface before carving, similar to techniques used by Egyptian tomb painters. However, no definitive evidence of these preliminary markings has survived, leaving the exact working method a mystery. The precision of the characters also raises questions about the tools used by ancient Persian craftsmen. Archaeological studies indicate that iron chisels were already in use during the Achaemenid period, but carving thousands of uniform wedge-shaped impressions into limestone would still require extraordinary skill and endurance. Each cuneiform symbol consists of a combination of angled impressions made by pressing or striking a chisel into the stone at carefully controlled angles. Maintaining consistency across such a vast inscription would require not only technical mastery, but also a standardized training system among the artisans involved. Some scholars estimate that completing the inscription could have required several years of continuous labor, possibly involving dozens of specialized stone carvers working in coordinated teams. The monument's relief sculpture adds another layer of complexity. At the center of the composition stands King Darius, depicted larger than the surrounding figures to emphasize his authority. Beneath his foot lies a defeated usurper, while a line of 9 captured rebels stands bound before him. Above the scene appears a winged symbol, representing divine approval from the Persian god Ahura Mazda. The sculptural elements are carved in raised relief with striking detail, capturing folds of clothing, facial features, and ceremonial weapons. Creating such intricate figures on a vertical rock surface would have required exceptional planning. The artist likely first smoothed the natural cliff face, then carefully mapped out the relief before carving deeper into the stone to create the figures and surrounding inscriptions. Centuries after its creation, the Behistun inscription played a crucial role in modern archaeology. In the early 19th century, a British officer and scholar, Henry Rawlinson, undertook the dangerous task of copying the text. Risking his life, Rawlinson climbed the cliff and suspended himself on ropes to transcribe the Old Persian portion of the inscription. Later expeditions expanded his work by documenting the Elamite and Babylonian sections. Rawlinson's research ultimately allowed scholars to decipher cuneiform writing, opening the door to the translation of thousands of ancient Mesopotamian tablets. Because of this breakthrough, the Behistun inscription is often compared to the Rosetta stone in its importance for understanding ancient languages. Archaeological research on the monument has continued for more than a century. Surveys conducted in the 20th century documented erosion patterns and confirmed that portions of the inscription had suffered damage from natural weathering and even gunfire during wartime. More recent studies using high-resolution digital imaging and laser scanning have revealed subtle carving techniques previously invisible to the naked eye. These analyses show that the artisans carefully adjusted the depth and angle of each wedge impression to maintain clarity even when viewed from a distance below. Such precision suggests a deliberate design strategy aimed at maximizing legibility under challenging viewing conditions. How do you think ancient craftsmen managed to carve thousands of perfectly aligned cuneiform symbols high on a vertical cliff more than 2,500 years ago? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The small limestone figurine known as the Venus of Willendorf remains one of the most mysterious artifacts ever discovered from the prehistoric world. Unearthed in 1908 by archaeologist Joseph Szombathy near the village of Willendorf along the Danube River in present-day Austria, this tiny sculpture stands only about 11 centimeters tall, yet it has provoked more than a century of scientific debate. Radiocarbon dating of the surrounding sediment layers places the figurine somewhere between roughly 25,000 and 30,000 years old, during the late phase of the Upper Paleolithic. At that time, human societies consisted primarily of small groups of hunter-gatherers living in Ice Age environments. Despite this seemingly simple lifestyle, the craftsmanship embodied in this figurine suggests a level of artistic intention and technical skill that continues to surprise researchers today. The figure portrays a woman with dramatically exaggerated physical features, large breasts, a rounded abdomen, wide hips, and thick thighs. In contrast, the arms are small and rest across the chest, the feet are barely defined, and the face is completely absent, hidden beneath a series of carefully carved spiral or braided patterns that resemble either hair or a woven headdress. Many archaeologists believe these proportions were deliberate rather than accidental. The emphasis on reproductive anatomy has led some scholars to interpret the statue as a fertility symbol or representation of a mother goddess, although there is still no direct evidence confirming this interpretation. Interestingly, similar prehistoric figurines, often collectively called Venus figurines, have been discovered across Europe, from France and Germany to Russia. Yet even among these, the Venus of Willendorf stands out because of its exceptional preservation and unusually detailed craftsmanship. One of the first scientific puzzles surrounding the statue involves the material itself. The figurine was carved from oolitic limestone, a type of rock composed of tiny spherical grains. Geological analysis conducted decades after its discovery revealed that this specific limestone does not occur naturally in the immediate Willendorf region. Instead, similar rock formations appear hundreds of kilometers away, particularly in areas of Moravia in what is now the Czech Republic. This discovery raised important questions about prehistoric mobility and trade. If the stone truly originated far from the site where the statue was found, then either the raw material or the finished sculpture must have travelled across large distances, possibly more than 150 kilometres. For small nomadic groups living during the Ice Age, such distances were significant. The implication is that prehistoric communities may have possessed far more extensive migration routes or exchange networks than previously imagined. However, perhaps the most fascinating and least understood aspect of the Venus of Willendorf is the faint but unmistakable layer of red pigment covering parts of the sculpture. When the figurine was first excavated in 1908, archaeologists observed traces of red coloration embedded in its surface. Later laboratory analysis identified the pigment as red ochre, a natural mineral composed largely of iron oxide. Red ochre is one of the earliest pigments used by humans and has been found in prehistoric burial sites, cave paintings, and ritual objects across multiple continents. Yet the way it appears on the Venus of Willendorf suggests something more sophisticated than simple decoration. Microscopic examinations performed in the 20th and 21st centuries revealed that the pigment does not merely rest loosely on the surface of the stone. Instead, it appears to have adhered quite firmly, suggesting that the colour may have been intentionally applied using some form of binding agent. And researchers have proposed that prehistoric artists could have mixed powdered ochre with animal fat, plant oils, or tree resin to create a primitive paint. Such mixtures would allow pigment to cling more effectively to stone surfaces, producing a deeper and longer-lasting coloration. Experiments conducted by archaeologists attempting to replicate prehistoric painting techniques have shown that combining ochre with animal marrow or fat can create a surprisingly durable pigment paste. The use of red pigment also carries symbolic implications. Throughout prehistoric archaeology, red ochre frequently appears in burial rituals, sometimes covering entire skeletons or grave goods. In some Upper Paleolithic graves, archaeologists have found bodies sprinkled with thick layers of ochre powder, possibly symbolizing blood, life, or rebirth. And because of this association, many scholars believe the red coating on the Venus of Willendorf may have held ritual or symbolic significance, rather than purely aesthetic value. Some researchers argue that the colour red could have been linked to fertility, menstruation, or childbirth, concepts deeply connected to survival in prehistoric societies. Further excavations in the region during the 20th century provided additional context. Archaeological surveys of the Willendorf area uncovered several Paleolithic occupation layers containing stone tools, hearth remains, and animal bones from Ice Age species such as mammoths and reindeer. Within these layers, fragments of ochre pigments were occasionally discovered, indicating that prehistoric inhabitants of the region had access to and regularly used mineral colorants. Yet the Venus figurine remains unique in the level of pigment application preserved on its surface. Comparisons with other prehistoric figurines also highlight this unusual feature. For example, several Venus figurines discovered in sites such as Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic or Lascaux in France show little or no remaining pigment traces. This difference raises another intriguing question. Was the red coloration once common among such sculptures, but later lost due to erosion over thousands of years? Or was the Venus of Willendorf intentionally coloured in a unique way? Some archaeologists suspect that many prehistoric figurines may originally have been painted, but that environmental conditions gradually removed the pigments over time. Technological questions also remain unresolved. Applying pigment evenly across a small sculpture requires a certain degree of control and preparation. The stone surface may have been lightly polished before painting, allowing the pigment mixture to adhere more effectively. Alternatively, the pigment may have been rubbed directly into microscopic pores within the limestone surface. In either case, the process suggests a level of experimentation and technical knowledge among prehistoric artisans that challenges older assumptions about Stone Age societies. Modern analytical techniques have attempted to investigate these possibilities further. Using methods such as scanning electron microscopy and chemical spectroscopy, scientists have studied microscopic pigment particles still embedded in the figurine's surface. These studies confirm the presence of iron-based mineral compounds typical of natural ochre sources. However, determining the exact preparation technique used by the prehistoric artist remains difficult. Organic binding agents such as fats or resins degrade over time, leaving little trace after tens of thousands of years. The presence of pigment also invites broader comparisons with prehistoric cave art. Famous sites such as Lascaux Cave and Altamira Cave contain paintings created roughly within the same general time period as the Venus of Willendorf. In these caves, artists used red, black, and yellow pigments made from minerals like ochre, manganese dioxide, and charcoal. The similarity in pigment materials suggests that early humans across Europe possessed a surprisingly consistent knowledge of natural colour sources and their applications. More than a century after its discovery, the Venus of Willendorf still fascinates archaeologists. Its detailed carving, distant stone origin, and traces of red pigment suggest that humans 30,000 years ago possessed artistic skill, symbolic thinking, and early colour technology that modern science is still trying to fully understand. How do you think humans 30,000 years ago learned the techniques to create pigments and carve stone so precisely as seen in the Venus of Willendorf? Share your theory in the comments below. Rising from the ruins of the ancient Assyrian capital of Nineveh, the Library of Ashurbanipal is often considered the earliest great library in human history. Built during the reign of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal in the 7th century BCE, this extraordinary archive once held tens of thousands of clay tablets containing the accumulated knowledge of Mesopotamian civilization. The remains of the library were first brought to the attention of the modern world in the mid-19th century when British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard and his team excavated the buried palaces of Nineveh. What they uncovered was astonishing. A massive archive containing more than 30,000 clay tablets and fragments written in cuneiform script, many of them preserved in remarkable detail despite being over 2,600 years old. These tablets covered a vast range of subjects, including royal records, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, religious rituals, mythology, and literature such as the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. Yet beyond the knowledge they preserved, the tablets themselves revealed something even more mysterious: the extraordinary technical skill required to produce them. Among the most fascinating and least fully understood aspects of the Library of Ashurbanipal is the astonishing precision of the cuneiform writing technology used on the clay tablets. Cuneiform, one of the earliest known writing systems, was created by pressing the tip of a reed stylus into soft clay to form small wedge-shaped impressions. At first glance, the technique might appear simple, but the tablets from Ashurbanipal's library demonstrate a level of control and accuracy that continues to surprise modern scholars. Many tablets measure only 15 to 20 centimeters in width, yet they contain several hundred individual characters arranged in perfectly aligned rows. Each wedge mark is consistently shaped and evenly spaced, sometimes measuring only a few millimeters across. The lines remain straight and balanced across the entire surface of the tablet, even though the writing was done entirely by hand on a soft and easily deformable material. Experimental archaeologists attempting to reproduce these tablets have discovered just how difficult this process truly was. Writing cuneiform with the same consistency found in the Ashurbanipal tablets requires extraordinary hand control and years of training. Even a slight variation in pressure can distort a symbol or damage the surface of the clay. Modern experiments have shown that a beginner often ruins several tablets before producing even a short readable line of cuneiform. Yet the tablets in the Royal Library frequently contain dozens of lines written with remarkable uniformity. Some scholarly tablets include more than 300 lines of text spread across multiple surfaces, including the front, back, and edges of the tablet. The precision of the wedge impressions suggests that scribes possessed not only exceptional training, but possibly standardized tools and writing techniques that have not survived in the archaeological record. What makes this even more intriguing is the miniaturization of the script. Certain tablets from the library contain extremely small cuneiform signs that are barely a few millimeters wide. Producing such tiny characters while maintaining clarity would have required both extremely fine styluses and extraordinary visual precision. In some cases, scholars have compared the density of text on these tablets to that of a modern printed page. Considering that this was achieved using a reed stylus and soft clay rather than metal tools or ink pens, the level of craftsmanship appears astonishing. Some researchers have even suggested that the scribes of Nineveh must have undergone long formal training within specialized scribal schools, where the art of writing cuneiform was practiced with the same discipline as calligraphy in later civilizations. Another remarkable aspect of the tablets is their durability and long-term data preservation. Unlike papyrus or parchment, clay tablets could survive for millennia if properly baked or fired. Ironically, the destruction of Nineveh around 612 BCE played a major role in preserving the library. When invading forces burned the city, the intense heat effectively fired many of the clay tablets like pottery in a kiln. Instead of being destroyed, the tablets hardened and became even more resistant to decay. As a result, thousands of them survived buried beneath the ruins for more than 2.5 millennia until their rediscovery in the 19th century. Today, many of these tablets are preserved in museums such as the British Museum, where scholars continue to study and decipher them. The archaeological excavations themselves also add another layer of mystery to the story. When Layard and later archaeologists excavated the palace of Ashurbanipal, they discovered entire rooms filled with collapsed shelves of tablets. Some tablets were neatly stacked, suggesting they had originally been organized according to subject. Others were scattered across the floor, apparently having fallen from wooden shelves when the palace collapsed. In several cases, archaeologists found tablets that appeared to be catalogue entries, listing the titles of other tablets that belonged to the collection. This suggests that the Assyrians had developed an early system of library organization, possibly including indexing methods similar in principle to those used in modern libraries. Even more intriguing is the fact that many tablets in the library were not original compositions created during Ashurbanipal's reign. Instead, they were copies of much older texts from earlier Mesopotamian civilizations such as Sumer and Babylon. Historical records indicate that Ashurbanipal actively ordered scholars and scribes throughout his empire to collect and copy ancient texts. In effect, the library functioned as a vast archive of knowledge accumulated over many centuries. Some texts preserved there may have originated more than 1,000 years before Ashurbanipal's time. Without these clay copies, entire bodies of ancient literature and scientific knowledge might have vanished forever. Yet despite more than a century of study, many questions remain unanswered. Scholars still debate how the Assyrian scribes maintained such consistent writing standards across thousands of tablets. The precise training methods used in scribal schools remain largely unknown. Likewise, the tools used to produce the smallest and most precise wedge impressions have never been fully reconstructed. Were the styluses carefully shaped to standardized dimensions? Did scribes use guides or grids when writing long lines of text? Or did years of practice alone allow them to achieve such extraordinary accuracy? The Library of Ashurbanipal stands as one of the greatest symbols of ancient knowledge and early information technology. Long before paper or printing existed, the Assyrians developed a system of recording knowledge on clay tablets that could survive for thousands of years. The tablets discovered in the ruins of Nineveh represent one of humanity's earliest large archives of written information. Even more than 2.5 millennia later, scholars are still translating the texts preserved in this library. Each newly deciphered tablet reveals another piece of the ancient Mesopotamian world. Yet one mystery remains. How did scribes, without modern tools, achieve such extraordinary precision when carving cuneiform symbols into soft clay? The answer may still lie hidden within the silent wedges left by human hands thousands of years ago. In your opinion, how were ancient scribes able to carve such tiny and extremely precise cuneiform symbols into soft clay without modern tools? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Standard of Ur is one of the most fascinating artifacts ever discovered from the ancient world, a small but extraordinarily complex object that continues to puzzle archaeologists more than 4,000 years after it was created. It was unearthed in 1927 during excavations of the Royal Cemetery at the ancient Sumerian city of Ur in southern Mesopotamia, in what is now modern-day Iraq. The excavation was led by the British archaeologist Leonard Woolley, who uncovered a series of spectacular royal tombs dating to around 2600 to 2400 BCE. Among the treasures found within these graves, alongside golden helmets, lyres decorated with precious stones, and elaborate jewellery, was a rectangular box roughly 21.6 centimetres long and 12 centimetres high. Woolley named it the Standard of Ur because he believed it might once have been mounted on a pole and carried like a military standard, although to this day no one is certain what the object was actually used for. Some scholars have proposed that it may have been a ceremonial container, a musical instrument box, or even a symbolic object used in royal rituals. The uncertainty surrounding its purpose only adds to the mystery. At first glance, the artifact appears to be a beautiful mosaic panel, but closer inspection reveals an astonishing level of technological sophistication. The outer surfaces are covered with thousands of tiny pieces of stone and shell, arranged in carefully organized scenes. The materials include brilliant blue lapis lazuli, red limestone, and white shell, and each cut into small geometric shapes and fitted together with remarkable precision. The lapis lazuli is particularly intriguing because geological studies show that the vast majority of ancient lapis originated in the Badakhshan region of modern Afghanistan, more than 2,000 kilometers from the city of Ur. This means that the artisans who created the standard of Ur had access to long-distance trade networks stretching across the ancient Near East. Archaeological evidence from Mesopotamian texts confirms that Sumerian merchants were already transporting exotic materials over enormous distances during the 3rd millennium BCE, but the presence of lapis lazuli in such finely crafted objects suggests a highly organized system of exchange. Similar materials appear in other artifacts from the royal cemetery of Ur, as indicating that elite workshops in the city had steady access to imported resources that travelled across mountains, deserts and rivers long before the invention of large-scale road systems. The two main faces of the artifact depict detailed narrative scenes that modern researchers call the war side and the peace side. These panels are divided into horizontal bands that function almost like the frames of a story. On the war side, chariots roll across the battlefield, crushing enemies beneath their wheels while soldiers march prisoners toward a towering king. On the peace side, musicians perform while servants bring food and animals to a royal banquet. The composition reveals a sophisticated understanding of visual storytelling. Figures increase in size as they move upward through the registers, emphasizing hierarchy and authority. The king, seated at the center of the banquet scene, is the largest figure, towering above the others as a visual symbol of power. Art historians often compare this structured storytelling technique to later narrative art in Egypt and Assyria, yet the standard of Ur predates many of those works by centuries. The level of planning required to arrange hundreds of tiny mosaic pieces into coherent images strongly suggests that Sumerian artisans worked from carefully designed patterns, possibly drawn onto the surface before the stones were applied. However, the most intriguing technological mystery of the standard of Ur lies not in the stones themselves, but in the materials that hold them together. Beneath the mosaic surface is a wooden core that once formed the structural body of the object. Although the wood has largely decayed over time, archaeological analysis indicates that the original core was likely made from imported timber such as cedar. What is truly remarkable is the adhesive substance used to attach the mosaic pieces to this wooden base. Chemical analysis of surviving residues suggests that the artisans used a mixture containing natural bitumen, a tar-like petroleum material that occurs naturally in Mesopotamia. Bitumen had been used in the region for thousands of years as waterproofing for boats, bricks, and building foundations, but the way it was used in the standard of Ur demonstrates a far more delicate application. The bitumen appears to have been heated and softened before being applied as a thin adhesive layer onto the wooden core, after which the tiny pieces of lapis lazuli, limestone, and shell were carefully pressed into place. What makes this technique extraordinary is its durability. Despite being buried in the soil for more than 4 millennia, many sections of the mosaic remained intact when Woolley excavated the artifact in the 1920s. The adhesive had preserved the alignment of the stones even though the wooden interior had partially decomposed. In modern conservation laboratories, scientists often compare the resilience of this ancient bitumen-based adhesive to modern synthetic bonding materials. While it is not chemically identical to modern epoxy or polymer glues, its performance over thousands of years demonstrates an impressive understanding of material properties. Bitumen is naturally water-resistant and chemically stable, which allowed it to protect the mosaic from moisture and environmental degradation inside the tomb. In fact, bitumen was also used by Sumerians to seal bricks in city walls and to waterproof the famous ziggurats of Mesopotamia. The standard of Ur shows that the same substance could also be used in extremely fine artistic applications, acting as both glue and structural support for fragile decorative elements. Excavations and conservation studies conducted at the British Museum during the 20th century revealed additional details about this ancient adhesive technology. When the artifact arrived in London after Woolley's excavation, conservators discovered that the panels were extremely fragile due to the decay of the wooden core. They carefully dismantled sections of the mosaic and reassembled them using modern supports. During this process, they observed that the bitumen layer still clung tightly to the stone pieces, even after thousands of years underground. This remarkable longevity has led researchers to compare the standard of with other ancient objects that use similar materials. For example, bitumen adhesives have also been found on Neolithic tools in the Near East and on decorative objects in ancient Egypt, but rarely at the same level of artistic complexity. In many cases, those adhesives survived only a few thousand years before deteriorating, whereas the adhesive on the standard of remained stable enough to hold delicate mosaic pieces in precise alignment. Modern analytical techniques such as infrared spectroscopy and microscopic examination have suggested that the bitumen may have been mixed with organic additives such as plant resins or fibers to improve flexibility and bonding strength. If this hypothesis is correct, it would indicate that Sumerian craftsmen were experimenting with composite materials thousands of years before modern material science formalized such techniques. The artisans may have understood, through experience, that combining different natural substances could produce stronger and more durable adhesives. In effect, they were practicing a form of early chemical engineering without the theoretical frameworks used today. The survival of the standard of therefore provides an extraordinary window into the technological knowledge of early Mesopotamian society. While the artifact is often admired for its vivid images of war and celebration, its deeper significance lies in the hidden engineering behind those images. The tiny mosaic pieces, the imported luxury stones, the carefully shaped wooden structure, and especially the resilient bitumen adhesive, all reveal a level of craftsmanship that challenges the assumption that ancient technology was primitive. More than 4,000 years ago, Sumerian artisans were capable of combining materials from distant lands into a single object held together by a sophisticated bonding system that has endured longer than many modern constructions. Today, the standard of remains one of the most important artifacts in the British Museum's Mesopotamian collection. Its durable adhesive, intricate mosaic craftsmanship, and unknown original purpose continue to intrigue historians and scientists. Even after decades of research, scholars still debate how the craftsmen of mastered such advanced techniques and what knowledge may have been lost over time. The artifact stands not only as a masterpiece of ancient art, but also as a powerful reminder of the remarkable technological ingenuity of the ancient world. What do you think about the incredible adhesive technology used by the ancient Sumerians that allowed this artifact to survive for more than 4,000 years? Share your thoughts in the comments below. More than 2,200 years ago, during the reign of Qin Shi Huang, an enormous underground project began near what is now Xi'an. Hidden beneath layers of soil for more than 2 millennia, this project would eventually be rediscovered in the year 1974 by farmers digging a well. What they uncovered became known as the Terracotta Army, one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries in human history. Today, archaeologists estimate that the complex contains more than 8,000 life-size soldiers, over 130 chariots, hundreds of horses, and thousands of bronze weapons. Yet beyond the sheer scale of this underground army lies a deeper mystery. The technological sophistication required to create such an immense and detailed project more than 2,000 years ago. Even with modern scientific analysis, several aspects of the Terracotta Army, particularly its production techniques and ancient paint technology, remain only partially understood. The first excavations conducted by Chinese archaeologists in the late 1970s revealed enormous pits stretching hundreds of meters across. Pit number 1 alone measures approximately 230 metres long and 62 metres wide, containing thousands of soldiers arranged in precise military formations. Each statue stands roughly 1.8 to 2 metres tall and weighs up to 200 kilograms. What immediately puzzled researchers was the remarkable individuality of the figures. No two faces appear identical. Some warriors have thick moustaches, others thin beards. Some wear elaborate top knots, while others display different styles of armor or helmets. This level of variation suggests that the artisans did not simply produce identical molds. Instead, many scholars believe the statues were created through a sophisticated combination of modular production and hand sculpting. Standardized body parts, such as legs, torsos, and arms, were likely produced using molds, while facial features and details were individually carved by hand. The result was a mass production system that still preserved artistic individuality, a concept that resembles modern industrial manufacturing methods. However, one of the most intriguing technological mysteries lies not in the clay itself, but in what once covered it. When the Terracotta Army was first excavated, archaeologists noticed that many figures still retained fragments of vivid paint. Contrary to the brown appearance we see today, the warriors were originally painted in striking colours: deep reds, bright blues, purples, whites, and blacks. These pigments were applied over a base layer of lacquer derived from the sap of the Chinese lacquer tree. This lacquer created a smooth surface onto which mineral pigments were carefully applied. Within minutes of exposure to air during excavation, however, the lacquer layer began to dry and contract, causing the paint to flake off almost instantly. As a result, much of the original colour vanished within hours of discovery. This unexpected chemical reaction forced archaeologists to halt further excavation for years while conservation techniques were developed, and scientific analysis of the remaining pigments revealed something even more extraordinary. Among the colours found on the warriors was a rare pigment known today as Chinese purple. Unlike many natural pigments used in ancient art, this substance is not naturally occurring. Instead, it is a synthetic compound composed primarily of barium copper silicate. To produce it, ancient craftsmen had to heat mixtures of minerals containing barium, copper, and quartz to temperatures exceeding 900 degrees Celsius. Such a process requires careful control of temperature and chemical reactions, something that implies a surprisingly advanced understanding of high-temperature kiln technology during the Qin dynasty. For comparison, similar synthetic pigments in the Mediterranean world, such as Egyptian blue, required comparable processes but were developed in entirely different cultural contexts. The existence of Chinese purple therefore raises an important question. How did ancient artisans in China develop such specialized chemical knowledge independently more than 2,000 years ago? Archaeological studies conducted in the early 2000s using spectroscopy and electron microscopy have shown that the pigment particles in Chinese purple crystals possess a highly ordered structure, indicating that the ancient production process was both consistent and controlled. Yet no written records describing the formula or method of production have ever been found. Without those records, modern researchers must attempt to reconstruct the process through experimental archaeology. Even today, reproducing the pigment precisely under ancient conditions remains difficult. This suggests that the craftsmen responsible for the Terracotta Army possess specialized knowledge that may have been carefully guarded within imperial workshops. The paint layers themselves also reveal another sophisticated technique. Before the pigments were applied, the statues were coated with several layers of lacquer that acted both as a primer and protective sealant. Lacquer is extremely durable and resistant to moisture, but it is also sensitive to rapid drying. When the statues remained buried underground, the surrounding soil maintained a stable humidity level that preserved the lacquer for centuries. Once exposed to air, however, the lacquer shrank rapidly, causing the paint layers to detach. Modern conservation teams working at the Terracotta Army site now use chemical stabilizers and controlled humidity chambers to preserve newly uncovered pigments. Thanks to these efforts, archaeologists have recently managed to recover several warriors with significant portions of their original colour still intact. Beyond the pigments, the weapons discovered alongside the warriors also reveal unexpected technological sophistication. Bronze swords, spears, and crossbow triggers found in the pits were still sharp and well preserved after more than 2 millennia underground. Some blades appear to have been treated with chromium compounds that slowed corrosion, although the exact mechanism behind this phenomenon remains debated. Whether intentional or accidental, the remarkable preservation of these weapons demonstrates that the Qin craftsmen had mastered complex metallurgical techniques. Despite decades of research, only a fraction of the entire burial complex has been excavated. The central tomb of Qin Shi Huang himself remains sealed beneath a massive mound nearby. Ancient historical texts, particularly those written by Sima Qian in the records of the Grand Historian, describe an underground palace filled with rivers of flowing mercury and ceilings decorated with representations of the stars. Modern soil analyses around the tomb mound have indeed detected unusually high concentrations of mercury, lending credibility to these ancient accounts. Because of the potential risks to fragile artifacts, Chinese authorities have chosen not to open the main tomb until preservation technology improves. The Terracotta Army is not only a vast burial project, but also proof of the remarkable technological achievements of the Qin Empire. The precision of the sculptures and the complex pigment techniques reveal a level of craftsmanship far ahead of its time. Even after more than 2,000 years, this silent army beneath Xi'an still holds secrets about lost ancient knowledge. In your opinion, how are ancient craftsmen able to create thousands of terracotta warriors with such intricate craftsmanship and complex paint technology more than 2,000 years ago? Was it simply extraordinary human skill? Or did they possess technologies that we still don't fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. More than 4,000 years ago, along the fertile floodplains of the Indus River, one of the world's earliest urban civilizations flourished in cities such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. These cities possessed carefully planned streets, sophisticated drainage systems, standardized brick construction, and extensive trade networks stretching across Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf. Yet among all the achievements of the Indus Valley civilization, perhaps the most enigmatic is a mysterious writing system known today as the Indus Valley script. Despite more than a century of archaeological study and linguistic analysis, this script remains completely undeciphered. Thousands of artifacts bearing these symbols have been unearthed. Yet no scholar has been able to determine what language they represent or even whether the symbols encode a full language at all. The greatest mystery lies not only in the script's age, but in its unusual structure, an intricate system of symbols that appear in extremely short sequences, unlike nearly any other ancient writing system known to history. The first clues to this forgotten script emerged in the early 20th century, when archaeologists excavating the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro uncovered small carved seals made of steatite stone. Many of these seals displayed elegant animal figures, bulls, elephants, tigers, and the famous unicorn motif, accompanied by rows of tiny geometric symbols carved with astonishing precision. As excavations expanded through the 1920s and 1930s under archaeologists such as John Marshall and later Mortimer Wheeler, hundreds of additional inscriptions were discovered across Indus sites. Today, researchers have documented more than 4,000 individual inscribed objects, including seals, pottery fragments, copper tablets, ivory rods, and stone plaques. Across all these artifacts, scholars have identified approximately 400 distinct symbols believed to form the core of the Indus writing system. Yet what makes this system extraordinary is not simply the number of symbols, but the length of the inscriptions themselves. Unlike the writing systems of Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt, which often recorded long religious texts, administrative records, or royal proclamations, the Indus script appears only in extremely short sequences. Most inscriptions consist of 5 to 7 symbols, and the longest known example contains only about 26 characters. This brevity has puzzled researchers for decades. In Mesopotamia, for example, Sumerian cuneiform tablets from around 3000 BCE frequently contain hundreds of wedge-shaped signs describing economic transactions, myths, or legal codes. Egyptian hieroglyphic inscriptions carved into temple walls and tombs often stretch across entire chambers, recording narratives of kings, gods, and afterlife rituals. Even early Chinese oracle bone inscriptions from the Shang dynasty contain extended questions posed to ancestors and deities. In stark contrast, the Indus Valley inscriptions appear almost cryptic, compact clusters of symbols that resemble labels or identifiers rather than sentences or stories. This unusual brevity raises a profound question. Was the Indus script truly a complete writing system, or something fundamentally different? Some scholars suggest the symbols may have functioned like trademarks or merchant signatures used in trade. Others propose that they represented names of individuals, clans, or institutions stamped onto goods moving through commercial networks. A third hypothesis argues that the script might encode religious or ritual information understood only within specific cultural contexts. Statistical analysis conducted by computational linguists in the early 21st century suggests that the sequence patterns of Indus symbols resemble those of genuine linguistic systems, displaying structured ordering rules rather than random arrangements. For instance, certain symbols consistently appear at the beginning of inscriptions, while others tend to occur near the end, behavior similar to grammatical patterns seen in known languages. Yet because no long texts survive, it remains impossible to confirm whether these symbols truly represent words, sounds, or something entirely different. Another fascinating aspect of the Indus script is the remarkable consistency of its symbols across a vast geographic area. Archaeological excavations have uncovered inscriptions from dozens of sites, spanning more than 1 million square kilometers, including Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, Lothal, Kalibangan, and many smaller settlements. Despite the enormous distances between these cities, sometimes hundreds of kilometers apart, the symbols appear strikingly standardized. The same motifs recur with minimal variation, suggesting that the civilization maintained a shared system of symbolic communication across its urban network. This level of standardization is particularly surprising because the Indus civilization has left little evidence of centralized kingship or monumental royal propaganda. Unlike Egypt with its pharaohs or Mesopotamia with its palace archives, Indus cities contain no obvious royal inscriptions proclaiming the power of rulers. Yet somehow their symbolic system remained remarkably uniform across generations and across cities. Equally mysterious is the technology used to produce these inscriptions. Many of the most famous examples appear on square steatite seals measuring only a few centimeters across. Craftspeople first carved intricate images and symbols into the soft stone using fine tools, then fired the seal in a kiln at temperatures approaching 1000 degrees Celsius, hardening the surface into a durable ceramic-like material. The resulting carvings are astonishingly precise. Individual strokes sometimes measure less than a millimeter wide, yet maintain consistent proportions and spacing. Such precision suggests a highly skilled class of artisans and possibly specialized engraving tools, though relatively few such tools have been recovered in excavations. The seals themselves were likely pressed into wet clay to mark goods or containers, functioning as administrative devices within trade networks that connected the Indus world to distant civilizations. Evidence of this international trade comes from discoveries far beyond South Asia. Archaeologists working in ancient Mesopotamian cities such as Ur and Lagash have uncovered Indus-style seals and beads dating to roughly 2500 BCE. Mesopotamian cuneiform texts even mention a distant land called Meluha, widely believed to refer to the Indus region. These records describe merchants arriving by sea, carrying timber, precious stones, metals, and exotic animals. If the Indus seals were used in such exchanges, their inscriptions may have served as identifiers for merchants or trading authorities, yet without deciphering the script, the exact meaning remains hidden. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Indus script is its sudden disappearance. Around 1900 BCE, many Indus cities began to decline, possibly due to climate shifts, changing river systems, or disruptions in trade. As the civilization gradually fragmented, the script vanished as well. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which evolved into later scripts such as Demotic and Coptic, or cuneiform, which influenced several later languages, the Indus script left no clear descendants. No bilingual inscriptions like the famous Rosetta stone have ever been discovered. No long manuscripts have survived to provide context. Instead, the symbols remain frozen on thousands of small objects, silent fragments of a lost communication system whose meaning has been erased by time. Today, researchers continue to study the Indus script using advanced technologies ranging from high-resolution digital imaging to machine learning analysis. Some scholars attempt to compare the symbols with Dravidian languages, while others explore possible connections with ancient Indo-Aryan or entirely unknown linguistic families. Yet the central challenge remains unchanged. Without longer texts or a translation key, the script resists all attempts at decipherment. Each seal, tablet, and pottery shard preserves only a brief sequence of enigmatic signs, too short to reveal their grammar, yet complex enough to suggest an organized system. Do you think the Indus Valley script was truly a complete writing system, or could it have been only an ancient trade symbol system? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Ötzi the Iceman is one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries ever made, not only because of the remarkable preservation of his body, but also because of the advanced technology revealed by the objects he carried. In September 1991, two hikers discovered a human body emerging from melting ice, high in the Ötztal Alps, at an altitude of about 3,200 meters near the modern border between Italy and Austria. At first, authorities believed the corpse belonged to a recently deceased mountaineer, but when archaeologists and forensic specialists began examining the body and surrounding artifacts, they realized they were looking at something far older. Radiocarbon dating later confirmed that the man had died more than 5,300 years ago, around 3,300 BCE, making him one of the oldest naturally preserved human bodies ever found in Europe. The cold, dry conditions of the glacier had effectively frozen him in time, preserving not only his skin and organs, but also his clothing, equipment, and even the contents of his stomach. Yet among all the remarkable objects discovered with Ötzi, one artifact stands out as particularly mysterious and technologically significant: his copper axe. At first glance, the axe may seem like a simple tool, but closer scientific analysis revealed something astonishing. The blade of the axe is made of copper with a purity level exceeding 99%, a remarkable achievement for a society living more than 5 millennia ago. Metallurgical studies conducted using X-ray fluorescence and mass spectrometry demonstrated that the copper had been carefully smelted and refined, indicating that the makers possessed a sophisticated understanding of early metallurgy. To extract copper from ore, ancient metallurgists would have needed to heat mineral deposits such as malachite to temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius. Achieving such temperatures required controlled furnaces, knowledge of airflow, and the ability to maintain sustained heat, technological capabilities that many historians once believed were rare or experimental during this period in Europe. In fact, during the time Ötzi lived, most communities across the continent were still primarily using stone tools characteristic of the late Neolithic period. The widespread use of metal tools would not become common in many regions until centuries later. This makes the presence of a highly refined copper axe in the hands of a man travelling through a remote alpine environment particularly puzzling. Archaeologists have compared Ötzi's axe with other early copper tools found in Europe, and the results highlight just how unusual it is. While a few early copper artifacts have been discovered in southeastern Europe dating to the 5th millennium BCE, particularly within cultures such as the Vincha and Varna civilizations, such objects were extremely rare and often associated with elite burials. Ötzi, however, appears to have been a traveller or hunter, crossing mountain terrain rather than a high-ranking ruler buried with ceremonial objects. The axe itself was not merely symbolic. It was clearly designed as a practical working tool. The copper blade measures roughly 10 centimeters in length and was carefully fitted into a yew-wood handle about 60 centimeters long. The blade was secured with strips of leather and a natural adhesive made from birch tar, demonstrating a complex understanding of composite tool construction. Birch tar, in particular, is a technologically demanding substance to produce, requiring the controlled heating of birch bark in a low-oxygen environment. Its presence suggests that Ötzi's culture possessed specialized knowledge of natural chemistry and material engineering. Even more intriguing is the origin of the copper used to produce the axe. In 2017, a major isotopic analysis study compared the chemical signature of the copper blade with known European copper deposits. The results indicated that the metal most likely originated from ore deposits in what is now southern Tuscany in central Italy, hundreds of kilometers away from the Alpine region where Ötzi died. This discovery suggests that long-distance trade networks may have existed across prehistoric Europe far earlier than previously assumed. If copper from central Italy reached communities living in the high Alps, it implies that materials, technologies, and possibly metallurgical knowledge was circulating across large geographic distances during the Copper Age. Such a network would challenge earlier assumptions that prehistoric mountain communities were isolated or technologically primitive. Instead, Ötzi's axe may represent evidence of a surprisingly interconnected prehistoric world. The advanced craftsmanship of the axe also raises questions about the skill level of the metallurgists who produced it. Microscopic examination of the blade's edge shows signs of hammering and sharpening, indicating that after casting, the copper was further worked to strengthen its structure. This process, known as cold hammering, can improve the hardness of copper by compressing its crystalline structure. While modern metallurgy explains this effect scientifically, it is remarkable that prehistoric craftsmen had already discovered practical methods for improving tool durability. Some experimental archaeologists have attempted to recreate Ötzi's axe using only technologies believed to be available during the Copper Age. These experiments revealed that producing a blade of comparable quality requires considerable expertise. Precise control of smelting conditions and access to high-quality ore. In other words, the axe was not a crude prototype of metallurgy, but rather a refined product of an established technological tradition. The presence of such a sophisticated tool also suggests something about Ötzi's social status. In many early Copper Age societies, metal tools were extremely valuable objects. copper was scarce, labor-intensive to produce, and often associated with prestige or leadership. Some archaeologists believe that carrying a copper axe may have signaled authority, wealth, or special status within a community. In fact, the famous burial site at Varna in Bulgaria, dating to roughly 4500 BCE, contained graves filled with gold and copper artifacts. Here are clearly indicating that metal objects had symbolic as well as practical value. If this cultural pattern extended into the Alpine regions, Ötzi's axe may have been more than a survival tool. It could have been a marker of identity or rank. Yet the circumstances of his death complicate this theory. When his body was found, he was lying alone in a rocky depression, surrounded by unfinished arrows and damaged equipment, suggesting he may have been fleeing from danger. Later, CT scans reveal that he had been struck by an arrow that pierced his left shoulder and severed a major artery, likely causing rapid blood loss. Despite decades of research, scientists continue to debate exactly what happened during Ötzi's final hours. Some evidence suggests he had recently eaten a substantial meal of ibex meat and grains shortly before his death, indicating he was not starving or lost. Other clues, such as defensive wounds on his hands and the incomplete state of his arrows, hint at a violent confrontation shortly before he collapsed in the mountains. Yet regardless of the circumstances of his death, the technological significance of his copper axe remains undeniable. It stands as one of the oldest complete metal tools ever discovered in Europe, preserved alongside the body of the man who carried it across the frozen Alps more than 5,000 years ago. Today, Ötzi's body and equipment are preserved at the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, Italy, where they continue to be studied using modern technologies such as CT scanning, DNA analysis, and isotopic research. These studies continue to reveal new information about his life and the world he lived in more than 5,000 years ago. This discovery has forced scientists to reconsider the technological capabilities of prehistoric societies. Ötzi's copper axe alone shows that complex metallurgy, long-distance material exchange, and advanced craftsmanship already existed in Europe much earlier than previously believed. For this reason, Ötzi is not simply a body preserved in ice. He is like a message from the past, reminding us that the technological history of humanity may still hold many mysteries waiting to be uncovered. The artifact known as the Baghdad Battery remains one of the most puzzling objects ever discovered in the archaeology of ancient technology. Unearthed in the year 1936 near the village of Kujut Rabu, just outside modern-day Baghdad, the object was first examined by the German archaeologist Wilhelm König, who at the time served as director of the National Museum of Iraq. König immediately noticed something extraordinary about the small clay jar he was studying. Unlike ordinary storage vessels from the Parthian or early Sasanian period, this jar contained a carefully arranged combination of materials that seemed strangely familiar to anyone who understood the basic principles of electrochemistry. The artifact consisted of a ceramic jar approximately 13 to 15 centimeters tall. Inside the jar was a rolled sheet of copper forming a cylindrical tube. Suspended within that copper cylinder was an iron rod, held in place by a plug of natural asphalt or bitumen that sealed the opening at the top of the jar. Crucially, the iron rod did not touch the copper cylinder directly, meaning the two metals were electrically separated while sharing the same interior space, an arrangement that strongly resembles the structure of a primitive galvanic cell. This configuration immediately attracted attention because it mirrors the fundamental design of a simple electrochemical battery. In a modern galvanic cell, two different metals are separated and immersed in an electrolyte solution, allowing electrons to flow between them through a chemical reaction. In the case of the Baghdad artifact, the copper cylinder and iron rod could theoretically act as electrodes, while the interior of the jar could have held an acidic liquid such as vinegar fermented grape juice, or lemon juice. If such a liquid were present, the difference in electrochemical potential between iron and copper could generate a small electrical current. When researchers in the 20th century recreated the structure of the Baghdad battery and filled it with vinegar, they measured voltages ranging between roughly half a volt and about 1 volt. While that may seem small by modern standards, it is comparable to the output of a single modern electrochemical cell. When multiple cells are connected in sequence, the voltage increases, a principle that could theoretically have been applied if ancient people used several such jars together. What makes this possibility particularly intriguing is the precision of the artifact's construction. The copper cylinder found inside the jar was not simply a loose piece of metal. It had been carefully rolled and soldered along a seam, forming a nearly complete tube. The iron rod was deliberately centered within that tube and sealed at the top using bitumen, which acted as an insulating stopper. The materials themselves were not random choices either. Copper and iron form an effective electrochemical pair, capable of producing measurable voltage when immersed in an acidic electrolyte. The same basic combination of metals appears in some of the earliest modern experimental batteries developed by scientists in the 18th and 19th centuries. In other words, the arrangement discovered in Iraq closely parallels technological principles that were not formally described in scientific literature until the age of modern electricity. Yet the true mystery lies not only in the structure of the object, but also in its historical context. The Baghdad battery is believed to date somewhere between approximately 200 years before the Common Era and 250 years after it, a time when the region was ruled first by the Parthian Empire and later by the Sasanian Empire. Archaeological excavations in the Kujut Rabu area uncovered several similar jars along with other everyday artifacts from that period. However, none of the surrounding finds provided clear evidence that the jars were part of an electrical system. There were no preserved wires, no metal conductors linking multiple jars, and no obvious devices that would have required electricity to operate. This absence of supporting technology has fueled intense debate among historians, archaeologists, and electrical engineers for decades. One hypothesis suggests that the jars might have been used for electroplating, a process in which electricity deposits a thin layer of metal onto another surface. Electroplating requires a power source, a conductive solution containing dissolved metal ions, and a pair of electrodes. If multiple Baghdad battery jars were connected together, they might theoretically have produced enough voltage to plate objects with a thin coating of silver or gold. Some researchers have pointed to ancient jewellery from the Middle East that appears to have extremely thin metallic coatings, which in some cases are difficult to explain using purely mechanical gilding techniques. Experiments conducted in laboratories during the 20th century showed that a series of reconstructed Baghdad batteries could indeed deposit thin layers of metal under controlled conditions. However, these experiments remain controversial because archaeologists have not found clear traces of electroplating workshops associated with the jars. Another group of scholars proposes a completely different explanation, that the artifact was never intended to produce electricity at all. Instead, they suggest the copper cylinder may have been used to store rolled papyrus or parchment documents, possibly protected inside the jar from moisture or damage. Others believe the container might have served as a vessel for medicinal compounds or ritual substances. Because the interior components are sealed with bitumen, it is difficult to determine exactly what materials the jars once contained. Chemical residue analysis performed on surviving examples has not produced definitive evidence of acidic electrolytes such as vinegar or wine, leaving the electrical hypothesis intriguing but unconfirmed. The mystery deepens when considering the broader technological landscape of the ancient world. By the first centuries of the Common Era, civilizations across the Mediterranean and Middle East had already developed surprisingly sophisticated engineering skills. Roman concrete could harden underwater and endure for millennia, whilst Greek astronomers constructed complex gear-driven devices such as the Antikythera mechanism to predict celestial cycles. Metallurgists throughout Persia and India produced advanced alloys and decorative metalwork with remarkable precision. Against this backdrop, the idea that ancient artisans might have accidentally or deliberately discovered basic electrochemical reactions does not seem entirely impossible. After all, simple galvanic reactions can occur whenever dissimilar metals and acidic liquids interact, a phenomenon that could theoretically have been observed long before the formal science of electricity existed. Despite nearly a century of research, the Baghdad battery remains an unsolved puzzle. Its structure clearly contains the elements needed to generate electricity, and modern reconstructions show it can produce a small electrical current. However, archaeologists have found no clear evidence that ancient people actually used it as a battery. Without wires, electrical devices, or written records describing its use, the electrical theory remains uncertain. Some scholars believe it was simply a container with another purpose, while others suggest it may reflect an accidental discovery of electrochemical reactions. Although small in size, the Baghdad battery raises enormous questions about the technological knowledge of ancient civilizations. Until new archaeological evidence is discovered, its true purpose remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of ancient technology. Do you think the Baghdad battery was truly an ancient electrical battery, or just an ordinary jar that has been misunderstood? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Stretching across the barren plains of southern Peru, the Nazca lines represent one of the most astonishing and mysterious achievements of ancient engineering. These enormous geoglyphs, etched into the surface of the Nazca Desert, were created by the ancient Nazca civilization roughly between 500 BCE and 500 CE. At first glance, the technique appears deceptively simple. The builders removed the dark, oxidized stones that cover the desert floor, revealing the lighter soil beneath and forming shallow grooves typically only 10 to 15 centimeters deep. Yet the simplicity of the method contrasts sharply with the staggering scale and precision of the designs themselves. Across an area of roughly 400 to 500 square kilometers, more than 1,000 lines, geometric shapes, verten, and giant figures stretch across the desert landscape. Many of these lines extend for kilometers in almost perfectly straight trajectories, while others form enormous images of animals such as hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, whales, and condors. What makes the Nazca lines truly extraordinary is that their full shapes can only be clearly recognized from the air, an aerial perspective that the Nazca people themselves could never have experienced. This paradox lies at the heart of the mystery. The most striking feature of the Nazca lines is their immense scale combined with astonishing geometric accuracy. Some of the animal figures measure between 50 and 300 meters in length. The famous hummingbird geoglyph, for instance, stretches about 93 meters from beak to tail, while the monkey figure measures roughly 100 meters long, with a spiral tail that displays remarkably consistent curvature. Even more impressive are the straight lines that cross the desert floor. Certain lines extend for more than 10 kilometers, while deviating by only a few meters over their entire length. In modern surveying terms, such precision would normally require measuring equipment, aerial observation, or advanced mapping techniques. Yet the Nazca culture possessed none of these technologies as far as archaeologists can determine. When researchers compare these lines to modern road construction or surveying methods, the level of alignment is startling. For example, if a modern engineer attempted to draw a perfectly straight 10-kilometer line across uneven terrain without aerial guidance, or even a small angular error of 1 degree would cause the line to deviate by more than 170 meters from its intended direction. The Nazca lines, however, often maintain astonishing straightness across natural slopes, ridges, and shallow valleys. Archaeologists began to understand the scale of this phenomenon only after aerial surveys became possible in the early 20th century. Although local residents had long known of the lines, their full shapes were not widely recognized until pilots flying over the region in the 1920s and 1930s reported seeing enormous drawings visible only from above. In 1927, Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia Gespe presented one of the first academic descriptions of the lines after observing them from nearby hills. Later, aerial photography in the 1940s and 1950s revealed the vast network of geoglyphs scattered across the desert plateau. Among the most influential researchers was the German mathematician Maria Ricci, who devoted more than 40 years to studying and mapping the lines. Ricci meticulously measured hundreds of geoglyphs and noted their astonishing proportions. She famously described the Nazca Desert as the largest astronomy book in the world, although later research would challenge the extent of the astronomical alignment she proposed. Despite decades of study, the technical process used to plan and construct these gigantic figures remains partially unresolved. Archaeologists have discovered wooden stakes at several Nazca sites that appear to have been used as markers. Yet radiocarbon analysis of some stakes dates them to approximately the 6th century CE, confirming their connection to the Nazca culture. Experiments conducted by researchers have demonstrated that small teams using ropes and stakes could theoretically create straight lines across open terrain. However, replicating the more complex figures, especially the perfectly proportioned animals, remains more difficult to explain. To draw a spider measuring more than 40 meters long with accurate leg symmetry, the designers would have needed a sophisticated method of scaling small drawings into massive ground patterns. Some scholars believe the Nazca may have used a grid system similar to techniques employed in mural painting or architectural layout, but direct archaeological evidence of such planning systems has yet to be discovered. Another layer of mystery lies in the astonishing consistency of the lines themselves. Many lines are approximately 30 to 40 centimeters wide and maintain nearly uniform depth across their entire length. This consistency suggests organized labor and careful planning rather than spontaneous creation. If dozens or even hundreds of workers participated, they would have needed precise instructions to ensure that each segment aligned perfectly with the overall design. In some areas, trapezoidal shapes span several hundred meters, with edges so straight that they resemble modern airstrips when viewed from above. These shapes intersect with long, straight lines that radiate across the desert like spokes from an invisible hub. Satellite imagery has revealed that certain lines extend beyond the immediate Nazca Plateau, connecting distant hills and natural landmarks. Such large-scale spatial planning implies a sophisticated understanding of landscape geometry. Comparisons with other ancient geoglyph traditions highlight just how unusual the Nazca lines are. In Britain, for example, the famous Uffington White Horse measures about 110 meters in length and dates to the late Bronze Age. While impressive, it represents a single large figure rather than a vast network of hundreds of images and thousands of lines. Similarly, geoglyphs in the Atacama Desert of Chile include large figures but rarely approach the same combination of scale, quantity, and geometric precision found in Nazca. Even monumental architectural projects such as the Egyptian pyramids required advanced planning, yet they remain visible from the ground and follow clear structural logic. The Nazca lines, by contrast, form a landscape-scale design whose full visual meaning emerges only from high altitude. Modern archaeological investigations continue to reveal new information about the site. In recent years, aerial drones and artificial intelligence have helped researchers identify dozens of previously unknown geoglyphs hidden beneath desert sediment. Several of these discoveries were announced by archaeologists working with Yamagata University, who have documented over 100 new figures since the early 2000s. Some of these newly discovered shapes are smaller human-like figures or animals, measuring less than 10 meters, suggesting that the tradition of creating geoglyphs evolved over centuries. Yet even these smaller figures maintain striking proportional accuracy, reinforcing the idea that the Nazca possessed a systematic design approach. Ultimately, the Nazca lines remain one of the greatest puzzles in ancient archaeology. Although the technique used to create them seems simple, the enormous scale and precision reveal remarkable planning and spatial understanding. How a civilization without aerial perspective managed to produce hundreds of perfectly aligned lines and giant images across such a vast desert is still unknown. More than 2,000 years later, the Nazca lines continue to challenge modern assumptions about the capabilities of ancient cultures. How do you think the Nazca people managed to create such enormous and incredibly precise designs when they couldn't see them from the air? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. The Antikythera mechanism is widely considered one of the most astonishing technological artifacts ever discovered from the ancient world. Recovered in 1901 from a Roman-era shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, the device initially appeared to be nothing more than a collection of heavily corroded bronze fragments embedded in rock. The shipwreck itself, discovered by sponge divers at a depth of about 45 meters, contained statues, ceramics, and luxury goods dating to roughly the 1st century BCE. Yet among these objects was something entirely unexpected: a compact mechanical device containing dozens of interlocking bronze gears. Over the following century, as archaeological methods improved and new imaging technologies became available, researchers gradually realized that the Antikythera mechanism was not simply a decorative instrument or navigational tool. Instead, it represented something far more extraordinary: what many historians now call the world's first known analog computer, designed to model the movements of celestial bodies and predict complex astronomical events. The true complexity of the mechanism only began to emerge decades after its discovery. Early examinations in the 1950s by physicist Derek J. de Solla Price revealed that the fragments contained a sophisticated gear system, far beyond anything previously known from classical antiquity. Later, in 2005, the International Antikythera Mechanism Research Project used high-resolution X-ray computed tomography to scan the interior of the surviving fragments. As these scans revealed at least 30 to 37 precision bronze gears, some with more than 200 teeth, arranged in layered gear trains that transferred rotational motion across multiple axes. The gears were cut with triangular teeth and engineered with remarkable accuracy, suggesting advanced metalworking and mathematical design. For comparison, similarly complex mechanical gear systems would not appear in European clockmaking until the 14th century, meaning the technological principles embedded in the Antikythera mechanism predated medieval mechanical clocks by nearly 1,400 years. Such an enormous chronological gap has led many historians of science to describe the device as a technological anomaly, an object that seems to belong to a much later era of engineering. Yet the most remarkable aspect of the Antikythera mechanism was not merely its mechanical sophistication, but the purpose for which that machinery was built. The device functioned as a miniature astronomical computer, capable of modelling the cycles of the heavens and predicting celestial events with surprising accuracy. When a user rotated a small hand crank on the side of the instrument, a series of interconnected gears would move several dials located on the front and back panels. These dials represented astronomical cycles known to Greek astronomers, allowing the device to track the positions of the sun and moon, as well as the progression of complex calendrical systems. Most astonishing of all, that the mechanism could predict solar and lunar eclipses decades in advance by mechanically reproducing long-term eclipse cycles discovered by ancient astronomers. Central to this capability was the incorporation of the Saros cycle, an eclipse prediction cycle lasting approximately 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, a total of 223 lunar months. Ancient Babylonian astronomers had recognized that eclipses tend to repeat according to this pattern, but translating such knowledge into a mechanical system was an extraordinary engineering challenge. On the back of the Antikythera mechanism, researchers discovered a spiral dial divided into 223 sections, each representing one lunar month within the Saros cycle. As the user turned the crank, a small pointer moved along this spiral scale. Specific symbols inscribed next to certain months indicated when an eclipse would occur, and even provided additional details about the type and characteristics of the event. In effect, the device acted as a portable eclipse predictor, allowing its owner to determine when future solar or lunar eclipses would take place, something that would have seemed almost magical in the ancient world. Even more impressive was the way the mechanism accounted for irregularities in celestial motion. The Moon does not orbit Earth at a constant speed. Its motion varies due to the elliptical shape of its orbit. To reproduce this phenomenon mechanically, the Antikythera mechanism included a highly sophisticated gear system that simulated the Moon's changing velocity. This system used a pin and slot mechanism combined with epicyclic gears to mimic the phenomenon known as the lunar anomaly, allowing the device to display the Moon's position with impressive accuracy. Until the Antikythera discovery, historians believed such differential-like mechanical principles were not used until the 16th century, particularly in Renaissance astronomical clocks. Yet here they appeared in a device built roughly 2,000 years earlier. Archaeological and textual evidence suggests that the Antikythera mechanism may have been influenced by the work of leading Greek astronomers such as Hipparchus of Nicaea, who lived in the 2nd century BCE and developed detailed mathematical models for lunar motion. Some scholars also speculate that the intellectual tradition behind the mechanism may trace back to the engineering culture associated with Archimedes, the famous mathematician and inventor of Syracuse. Ancient Roman writers even described mechanical planetariums created by Archimedes that could demonstrate the movements of the heavens. Although no direct evidence links him to the Antikythera mechanism itself, such descriptions show that advanced mechanical representations of the cosmos may have existed in the Hellenistic world. Additional clues about the device's purpose were revealed through the discovery of extensive inscriptions engraved onto its bronze surfaces. Using advanced imaging techniques, researchers have identified more than 2,000 Greek characters carved into the fragments. These inscriptions functioned almost like an instruction manual, explaining the astronomical cycles represented by the dials, and guiding the user in interpreting the results produced by the mechanism. The letters are extraordinarily small, some measuring only 1.2 millimeters in height, demonstrating the remarkable craftsmanship of the artisans who produced the device. The text also references important Greek athletic festivals such as the Olympic Games, suggesting that the mechanism may have served both astronomical and calendrical purposes, helping synchronize civic calendars with celestial cycles. Despite more than a century of study, however, the Antikythera mechanism continues to raise profound historical questions. No other device of comparable complexity from the ancient world has yet been discovered. The mechanism appears to represent a level of precision engineering that vanished from historical records for more than a millennium. After the decline of the Hellenistic scientific tradition and the political upheavals of the late classical era, the knowledge required to build such machines may have been lost or preserved only in fragments of texts that no longer survive. When mechanical clockmaking finally emerged in medieval Europe around the 1300s, its designers seemed to rediscover principles that had already been mastered by Greek engineers nearly 2,000 years earlier. Today, the Antikythera mechanism remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Combining astronomy, mathematics, and mechanical engineering, it reveals a forgotten technological tradition in the ancient Mediterranean world. And this remarkable device could predict eclipses, track celestial cycles, and model the movements of the heavens, all within a handheld mechanism built more than 2 millennia ago. For modern researchers, it serves as a powerful reminder that ancient technology may have been far more advanced than we once believed. If a machine this advanced existed more than 2,000 years ago, what other lost technologies might ancient civilizations have created? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the year 1929, archivists working inside the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul uncovered a fragile fragment of parchment that would soon become one of the most controversial artifacts in the history of cartography. The document was a portion of a world map created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and navigator Piri Reis, a skilled sailor who served in the Ottoman Navy during a time when European exploration was still in its infancy. The surviving fragment, drawn on carefully prepared gazelle skin parchment, measuring roughly 90 by 63 centimeters, depicts parts of Europe, West Africa, the Atlantic Ocean, and the eastern coastline of South America. At first glance, the map appears similar to other Renaissance-era nautical charts, decorated with ships, sea monsters, and elaborate compass roses. Yet as historians and geographers began studying the document more closely, they discovered details that seemed far too precise for the early 16th century. Over the past century, the Piri Reis map has repeatedly forced researchers to ask an unsettling question. How could such a complex and accurate map exist at a time when global geographic knowledge was still incomplete? One of the first features that captured the attention of scholars was the surprising accuracy of the South American coastline. When modern cartographers compared the map to satellite data and contemporary atlases, they found that several sections of the Brazilian coastline align remarkably well with modern measurements. Considering that Christopher Columbus reached the Caribbean only 21 years earlier, in 1492, and the systematic mapping of South America was still underway in the early 16th century, the level of detail displayed on the map is difficult to explain. Portuguese explorers were indeed mapping the Atlantic coast of Brazil during the late 1400s and early 1500s, but the knowledge was fragmented and closely guarded as state secrets. Yet the Piri Reis map appears to combine this information into a coherent visual representation. Even more intriguing is the fact that the admiral himself left notes written directly on the parchment explaining how the map was compiled. In these annotations, he claimed that he relied on more than 20 separate source maps, including charts drawn by Portuguese explorers, Arab geographers, and even maps believed to date back to the era of Alexander the Great. If these claims are accurate, the Piri Reis map may represent a rare surviving example of how geographic knowledge from multiple civilizations was combined into a single unified chart. However, the most fascinating and technically mysterious aspect of the map lies not in its depiction of coastlines, but in the extraordinary method used to synthesize those different sources into one coherent map. Creating a composite map from dozens of independent charts is far more complicated than simply copying information. Each original map would have been drawn with its own scale, orientation, and projection system. Some might have been simple Portolan charts used by Mediterranean sailors, while others could have been schematic maps based on traveller accounts. In order to combine them accurately, the cartographer would need to understand how to convert distances, align coastlines, and reconcile different coordinate systems. These are problems that belong to the advanced science of cartographic projection, a discipline that did not fully mature until the 17th and 18th centuries. Yet the Piri Reis map seems to demonstrate a surprising awareness of these principles nearly 200 years earlier. Modern researchers have attempted to analyze the geometry of the map to understand how it was constructed. In the 1950s, historian Charles Hapgood and a team working with the US Air Force cartographic specialists examined the chart in detail. Their analysis suggested that portions of the map could correspond to a projection similar to a spherical or azimuthal projection, which allows sections of the curved surface of the Earth to be transferred onto a flat surface with reduced distortion. According to Hapgood's calculations, the coastline geometry implied that the original source maps may have been drawn using a center point somewhere near modern-day Egypt or the Eastern Mediterranean. Whether or not this interpretation is correct, the analysis demonstrated that the map is far more mathematically structured than previously believed. The coastline does not simply follow random medieval drawings. It follows a consistent spatial logic that suggests deliberate geographic transformation. The complexity of this synthesis becomes even clearer when we consider the technological limitations of the early 16th century. At that time, sailors could determine latitude relatively easily by measuring the height of the sun or stars above the horizon, using instruments such as the astrolabe or cross staff. Longitude, however, was an entirely different challenge. Without accurate marine chronometers, which would not be invented until the mid-18th century by John Harrison, determining longitude at sea was extremely difficult. Errors of hundreds of kilometers were common, yet the alignment of certain coastal segments on the Piri Reis map suggests that the original sources may have used surprisingly reliable positional data. If Piri Reis truly compiled maps originating from multiple centuries and cultures, he somehow managed to reconcile their positional inaccuracies into a visually consistent system. Another fascinating element of the map is the extensive written commentary included along its margins. Piri Reis did not simply draw coastlines. He documented his sources and explained his methodology. One inscription states that the map was constructed using 8 Jafariya maps, an Arab map of India, 4 Portuguese maps of the Indian Ocean, and a map drawn by Columbus. These notes are invaluable because they reveal that the map was not the product of a single exploration voyage, but rather the culmination of centuries of accumulated geographic knowledge. In essence, Piri Reis functioned as a data compiler, gathering information from disparate traditions and converting it into a unified cartographic model. In modern terms, the process resembles geographic data integration. The same principle used today in digital mapping systems such as Geographic Information Systems, GIS. The difference, of course, is that Piri Reis was working entirely by hand, using parchment, ink, and inherited charts rather than satellites and computers. The discovery of the map in 1929 sparked intense academic debate. Archaeologists and historians carefully studied the parchment, using chemical analysis and historical comparison, confirming that the ink, materials, and writing style all correspond to the early 16th century. Subsequent studies of Ottoman archival documents verified that Piri Reis indeed produced several nautical charts and wrote a famous navigation manual known as the Kitab-ı-Bahriye, completed in 1521 and later revised in 1526. This work described hundreds of Mediterranean ports and demonstrated the admiral's deep understanding of maritime geography. Yet none of his surviving works matched the sheer conceptual ambition of the 1513 world map. More than 500 years after it was created, the Piri Reis map still fascinates historians and archaeologists. It combines knowledge from Ottoman, Arab, and European navigation traditions into a single chart. The greatest mystery is the advanced technique used to merge many different maps into one projection. In a time before accurate longitude measurements, Piri Reis produced a map suggesting a surprisingly advanced understanding of Earth's geography, making it one of the most intriguing mysteries in the history of science. How do you think Piri Reis was able to combine so many different maps into such an accurate chart in a time without modern surveying technology? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Nebra sky disk, discovered in 1999 on the Mittelberg Hill near the town of Nebra in Germany, is widely considered one of the most mysterious archaeological artifacts ever found in Europe. Dating to around 1600 BCE, during the early Bronze Age, the disk measures roughly 32 centimeters in diameter and weighs about 2.2 kilograms. At first glance, it appears to be a simple bronze disk decorated with gold shapes, yet detailed archaeological and scientific studies have revealed that it may represent the oldest known concrete depiction of the cosmos in human history. The artifact was originally unearthed by illegal treasure hunters using metal detectors, and only after a dramatic police sting operation in 2002 was it recovered and delivered to archaeologists for proper study. Since then, researchers from institutions such as the State Office for Heritage Management and Archaeology of Saxony-Anhalt and the Halle State Museum of Prehistory have conducted extensive analyses of the disk using modern scientific techniques, including metallurgical testing, isotopic analysis, and high-resolution imaging. These investigations have uncovered not only the astronomical significance of the disk, but also an astonishing level of technological sophistication, especially in the metallurgy and gold inlay techniques used to create it. The disk's surface contains gold symbols carefully embedded into a bronze base, including a circular golden plate, interpreted as either the sun or a full moon, a crescent moon, and 32 individual stars, one cluster of 7 of which is widely believed to represent the Pleiades star cluster. Later modifications added 2 golden arcs along the sides of the disk and another arc at the bottom. Archaeologists studying the side arcs discovered that the angle between them measures approximately 82 degrees, which corresponds closely to the angle between the points on the horizon, where the sun rises and sets at the summer and winter solstices at the latitude of central Germany. Such accuracy suggests that the creators of the disk possessed an unexpectedly sophisticated understanding of astronomical cycles. However, while the astronomical interpretation is remarkable, many researchers argue that the most astonishing aspect of the Nebra sky disk lies not in its symbolism, but in the technological expertise required to manufacture it. Metallurgical analysis conducted during several research campaigns between 2002 and 2010 revealed that the bronze of the disk was made primarily from copper, sourced in the Mitterberg mining region of the Austrian Alps, more than 500 kilometers from Nebra. The gold used for the inlaid symbols was traced through isotopic analysis to deposits in Cornwall, in southwestern Britain, nearly 1,400 kilometers away. This discovery indicates the existence of long-distance trade networks across Bronze Age Europe that were far more extensive than previously believed. Such networks may have connected communities across Central Europe, the British Isles, and possibly even the Mediterranean. As archaeologists often compare this trade system to the later Bronze Age exchange routes, known from shipwrecks such as the Uluburun wreck off the coast of Turkey, which contained materials originating from multiple regions of the ancient world. In the case of the Nebra sky disk, the presence of metals from distant sources suggests that the people who created it were not isolated tribal groups, but participants in a complex and interconnected cultural network spanning thousands of kilometers. Yet the real technological mystery lies in how the gold symbols were attached to the bronze surface. Under microscopic examination, researchers discovered that the gold sheets used on the disk are extremely thin, in some places measuring only around 0.2 millimeters in thickness. Each gold element was carefully shaped and then inserted into precisely cut recesses in the bronze surface. These recesses were carved before the disc cooled completely, allowing the gold to be mechanically fitted and hammered into place. Achieving this required an extraordinary level of control over metalworking processes. Bronze must be heated to temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius in order to be cast and shaped effectively. Maintaining such temperatures during the early Bronze Age would have required highly specialized furnaces and skilled artisans capable of controlling airflow and fuel supply. Archaeometallurgists studying the disc have suggested that the craftsmen who produced it possessed techniques comparable in sophistication to those used by advanced Bronze Age cultures in the Eastern Mediterranean. Comparisons with other European Bronze Age artifacts highlight just how unusual this object is. Many bronze tools and weapons from the same period, such as swords, axes, and spearheads, display excellent craftsmanship, but they rarely incorporate complex decorative inlays made from precious metals. Even in civilizations known for advanced metalworking such as Mycenaean Greece or ancient Egypt, gold inlay techniques were typically reserved for elite ceremonial objects produced in highly developed urban centers. The Nebra sky disk, however, appears to have been created in a region that archaeologists once believed lacked such technological sophistication. This raises an intriguing question. How did artisans in Central Europe develop such advanced metallurgical skills centuries before similar techniques became widespread elsewhere in the region? Another remarkable aspect of the disc is that it was modified multiple times after its creation, indicating that it remained in use for a long period. Archaeologists studying microscopic wear patterns and metallurgical layers have identified at least 4 distinct phases of alteration. In the earliest phase, the disc contained the sun, or full moon, the crescent moon, and the 32 stars. In the second phase, the 2 horizon arcs were added, suggesting a shift toward representing the movement of the sun across the horizon. In the third phase, a curved golden band was placed near the bottom of the disc, which some researchers interpret as a solar barge, a symbol found in ancient mythologies representing the sun travelling across the sky. Finally, a ring of small holes was punched around the edge of the disc, possibly so it could be mounted on cloth, leather, or wood during ritual ceremonies. The fact that these modifications were carefully executed without damaging the earlier elements demonstrates once again the remarkable precision of the craftsmen involved. The circumstances of the disc's burial also add to its mystery. When archaeologists finally recovered the artifact, it was found buried together with 2 bronze swords, 2 axes, a chisel, and spiral bracelets, all of which date to the same Bronze Age period. Such deposits are often interpreted as ritual offerings, suggesting that the disc may have held religious or symbolic significance, rather than being merely a scientific instrument. However, the exact reason for its burial remains unknown. Some researchers believe it may have been deliberately deposited as part of a sacred ceremony, while others suggest it could have been hidden during a time of conflict or political upheaval. Today, the Nebra sky disk is considered one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century and is listed in UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. Yet its true purpose remains uncertain. Did Bronze Age craftsmen really understand the astronomical knowledge shown on the disk, or was it mainly a symbolic ritual object? Even after more than 3,600 years, the Nebra sky disk continues to challenge our understanding of ancient technology. Do you think the Nebra sky disk was truly an ancient astronomical instrument, or merely a symbolic ritual object representing the sky? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Rosetta Stone is widely considered one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever made, yet it also remains a source of fascination and mystery for historians and researchers. The stone was discovered in 1799 near the Egyptian town of Rosetta, now called Rashid, by French officer Pierre-François Bouchard during Napoleon Bonaparte's military campaign in Egypt. The artifact itself is a large slab of dark granodiorite, measuring approximately 114 centimeters in height, 72 centimeters in width, and about 28 centimeters thick, weighing roughly 760 kilograms. Today it is housed in the British Museum, where it continues to attract millions of visitors each year. What makes the Rosetta Stone extraordinary is that it contains the same decree written in 3 different scripts: Egyptian hieroglyphs, Demotic script, and Ancient Greek. The text is a decree issued in 196 BCE during the reign of King Ptolemy V, praising the young ruler and outlining tax exemptions and honours granted to Egyptian temples. For centuries, scholars had been unable to understand Egyptian hieroglyphs, a writing system that had effectively been lost since the late Roman period. It was only after the discovery of this trilingual inscription that linguists gained the crucial key needed to decode the ancient language. In 1822, the French scholar Jean-François Champollion successfully deciphered hieroglyphic writing by comparing the Greek text, which scholars already understood, with the Egyptian scripts. This breakthrough transformed the entire field of Egyptology. However, beyond its linguistic importance, the Rosetta Stone also reveals remarkable aspects of ancient technology and craftsmanship that still raise intriguing questions among archaeologists. One of the most striking and mysterious aspects of the Rosetta Stone is the astonishing precision with which its inscriptions were carved into an exceptionally hard material. The slab is made of granodiorite, a dense, igneous rock closely related to granite. On the Mohs hardness scale, granodiorite typically ranks between 6 and 7, making it extremely difficult to carve without durable tools. Yet the surface of the Rosetta Stone contains thousands of finely carved characters, arranged in remarkably straight and evenly spaced lines. The Greek section alone contains more than 770 characters, while the Demotic script includes approximately 1,400 symbols. Above these sections, the hieroglyphic inscription originally contained nearly 200 carefully shaped characters before part of the stone was broken off. Many of these carvings are only a few millimeters deep, but they display crisp edges and consistent spacing that suggest extraordinary craftsmanship. Archaeologists studying the stone have observed that many lines remain perfectly aligned even across long rows of text, stretching more than 60 centimeters across the surface. When compared to other ancient inscriptions, such precision is impressive even by the standards of skilled stone carving traditions. For example, inscriptions found in ancient Greek marble temples or Roman monuments such as the Arch of Titus also display careful carving, but those are typically cut into softer limestone or marble rather than granodiorite. Working with such a hard stone would have required tools capable of repeatedly striking the surface without breaking or deforming. This raises an intriguing question about the exact technology used by Egyptian craftsmen during the Ptolemaic period. Scholars believe the artisans may have used hardened iron chisels combined with hammerstones to gradually chip away the rock surface. However, iron tools of the 3rd century BCE were still relatively primitive compared to modern steel instruments. Reproducing the same level of precision using experimental archaeology has proven extremely time-consuming. In controlled laboratory reconstructions, researchers attempting to carve hieroglyphic characters into granite using reconstructed ancient tools often required hours to complete a single symbol. Yet the Rosetta Stone contains thousands of characters carved with consistent depth and uniformity, suggesting the work may have involved a highly organized team of skilled specialists rather than a single craftsman. Some archaeologists also suspect that scribes first painted or inked the text onto the stone before carving began, providing a precise guide for the stonecutters. Faint traces of layout marks visible on other Egyptian monuments support this theory, although direct evidence on the Rosetta Stone itself remains inconclusive. The possibility of a pre-carving layout system suggests a surprisingly sophisticated production process that resembles a form of ancient publishing technology. Archaeological discoveries have revealed that the Rosetta Stone was not unique in its function. Similar decrees honouring Ptolemaic rulers have been found at other temple sites across Egypt, including the Canopus decree discovered in 1866 and the Memphis decree fragments found in later excavations. These inscriptions also appear in multiple scripts, indicating that bilingual or trilingual monuments may have been more common than previously believed. However, most of these examples were carved into limestone or other softer stones, making the Rosetta Stone particularly unusual due to the hardness of its material. Additionally, many comparable inscriptions were damaged or incomplete, whereas the Rosetta Stone preserved enough text to allow scholars to perform detailed comparisons between languages. The survival of such a well-preserved artifact may therefore be partly due to the durability of granodiorite itself. Geological analysis conducted in the 20th century suggests the stone was likely quarried near Aswan in southern Egypt, a region famous for producing high-quality granite used in many monumental structures, including obelisks and statues. Another puzzle surrounding the Rosetta Stone is that the upper portion of the slab is missing. Based on the structure of similar decrees, researchers estimate that nearly 1/3 of the original inscription was lost when the stone broke in antiquity. This missing portion probably contained additional hieroglyphic text and possibly decorative imagery representing Egyptian gods or royal symbolism. Because of this damage, the hieroglyphic section preserved on the stone is incomplete, forcing scholars to reconstruct certain phrases by comparing them with other Ptolemaic inscriptions discovered later. The break also raises questions about the stone's later history. Some evidence suggests the monument may have originally stood in a temple before being reused centuries later as construction material for a fortress during the medieval period. This reuse could explain why the top section disappeared long before its discovery in 1799. Although the Rosetta Stone unlocked the language of ancient Egypt, it also shows how much knowledge from ancient civilizations was lost, and for centuries scholars could not understand hieroglyphs, believing they were only symbolic images. Champollion later proved that many hieroglyphs represented sounds, allowing researchers to read thousands of ancient inscriptions. Even more than 2,000 years later, the Rosetta Stone still reminds us that many secrets of the ancient world may remain hidden beneath the sands of history. If the Rosetta Stone had never been discovered, do you think humanity would ever have been able to decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs? And in your opinion, could there still be other Rosetta Stones buried beneath the desert sands waiting to be found? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun remains one of the most extraordinary archaeological events in modern history. Hidden for more than 3,000 years beneath the desert cliffs of the Valley of the Kings, the burial chamber known as Cave 62 was finally uncovered in 1922 by the British archaeologist Howard Carter, after nearly a decade of painstaking excavation. When Carter famously peered through a small opening in the sealed doorway and was asked if he could see anything, he reportedly replied with the now legendary words, "Yes, wonderful things." What he had glimpsed was not merely treasure, but a time capsule of ancient Egyptian technology and craftsmanship, preserved almost perfectly after more than 30 centuries. Among the thousands of objects discovered within the tomb, over 5,000 catalogued artifacts in total, none astonished researchers more than the extraordinary mastery of gold working displayed throughout the burial assemblage. Gold was sacred to the ancient Egyptians, often described as the flesh of the gods, yet the objects from Tutankhamun's tomb reveal a level of metallurgical skill that still surprises modern scientists. The most iconic artifact, the funerary mask of Tutankhamun, weighs approximately 11 kilograms and is crafted from high-purity gold, estimated by modern analysis to contain over 95% gold content. Despite its size and weight, the mask's surface thickness is remarkably consistent, suggesting that ancient craftsmen possessed a sophisticated understanding of metal hammering and annealing processes. Microscopic examination has revealed that the mask was created from multiple hammered gold sheets carefully joined together, yet the seams are so precise they are almost invisible even under magnification. Modern goldsmiths using hand tools often struggle to maintain such uniform thickness over a large curved surface, yet Egyptian artisans accomplished this more than 3,000 years ago without electric furnaces, modern alloys, or precision measuring devices. Even more astonishing is the complex inlay work embedded within the mask and other objects from the tomb. The artisans combined gold with semi-precious stones such as lapis lazuli, quartz, carnelian, turquoise, and obsidian, as well as coloured glass that imitated rare minerals. Each inlay was cut with extreme precision, so that the stones fit perfectly into the gold framework. Some decorative grooves measure less than a millimetre in width, yet the stones fit so tightly that no visible adhesive appears on the surface. Researchers studying the mask have suggested that the craftsmen likely used a sophisticated combination of organic resins and natural adhesives to secure the stones, but the exact formula of these bonding agents remains uncertain. Remarkably, after more than 3 millennia, many of these inlays remain firmly attached, surviving humidity changes, temperature fluctuations, and burial conditions that would normally degrade organic materials. The tomb contained not only the famous mask, but also an enormous quantity of other gold artifacts that demonstrate similar technological sophistication. Tutankhamun's nested coffins, for example, represent an extraordinary feat of metallurgy. The innermost coffin alone is made of solid gold and weighs roughly 110 kilograms. Producing such a large object from gold would have required careful control of metal thickness and structural reinforcement, since pure gold is extremely soft and prone to deformation. Yet the coffin retained its shape for thousands of years, while supporting the weight of the mummy and other burial materials. Its decorative surface features extremely detailed engravings, hieroglyphic inscriptions, and protective deities sculpted in relief. Modern metallurgical studies indicate that the coffin's gold was worked repeatedly through cycles of heating and hammering to maintain structural integrity, demonstrating a surprisingly advanced understanding of metal behavior. Another fascinating aspect of the gold technology in the tomb is the widespread use of gold leaf and gilding techniques. Many wooden objects discovered in the burial chamber, including chariots, furniture, and ceremonial statues, were coated with extremely thin layers of gold foil. These sheets were often less than 1/10 of a millimetre thick, yet were applied so smoothly that the underlying wood grain remains visible beneath the metal surface. In modern manufacturing, similar gilding processes often require specialised adhesives and controlled environments. However, the Egyptians achieved durable gilding using natural glues derived from plant resins or animal products. Some gilded objects in the tomb have retained their gold coatings for over 3,000 years with minimal deterioration, raising questions about the precise chemical composition of the adhesives used. Researchers analysing fragments of gilded decoration have found traces of organic compounds that may have acted as binding agents, but the exact recipes remain uncertain because many ingredients have degraded beyond clear identification. Comparisons with later historical technologies further highlight how remarkable these achievements were. In medieval Europe, goldsmiths often relied on relatively simple hammering techniques, and frequently reinforced gold structures with copper alloys to increase strength. Yet the Egyptians working in the 14th century BCE were already producing large pure gold structures with complex inlays and decorative elements. Even today, recreating some of the objects from Tutankhamun's tomb using only ancient tools would be extremely challenging. Experimental archaeologists attempting to reproduce similar gold masks have found that maintaining consistent thickness while shaping curved surfaces requires extraordinary skill and patience, suggesting that Egyptian workshops must have employed highly specialized artisans trained over many years. Archaeological excavations and scientific studies conducted since Carter's original discovery have continued to reveal new insights into these technologies. In 1926, as detailed conservation work began in Cairo to stabilize and document the tomb's artifacts. Later studies using X-ray imaging and scanning electron microscopy have allowed researchers to examine the internal structure of the gold objects without damaging them. These investigations revealed subtle hammer marks and tool impressions that provide clues about ancient manufacturing techniques. In 2016, advanced spectroscopic analysis conducted by international research teams confirmed that many gold objects from the tomb were produced using gold sourced from Nubian mines, demonstrating the vast trade networks and resource management of the Egyptian Empire at the time. Yet despite decades of research, many questions remain unanswered. How did Egyptian craftsmen achieve such precise shaping and joining of gold using only simple bronze tools and stone polishing instruments? How were large quantities of gold refined to such high purity levels without modern chemical processes? And perhaps most intriguing of all, how did they develop adhesives capable of bonding gold leaf and delicate inlays so securely that they have survived thousands of years in burial conditions? These unresolved mysteries continue to fascinate historians, archaeologists, and material scientists alike. The tomb of Tutankhamun represents far more than a spectacular treasure hoard. It reveals that ancient Egyptian artisans possessed technological knowledge and craftsmanship far more advanced than many once believed. The golden artifacts from KI-62 not only reflect royal burial traditions, but also demonstrate remarkable engineering and metallurgical skill. Even today, these treasures continue to challenge modern assumptions about the true technological capabilities of the ancient world. Do you think the extraordinary gold craftsmanship in the tomb of Tutankhamun could be evidence of an ancient level of technology that we still don't fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden beneath layers of wet soil near Vindolanda, archaeologists uncovered one of the most extraordinary archives from the ancient world, the Vindolanda tablets. These thin wooden sheets, dating roughly from the late 1st century to the early 2nd century CE during the early occupation of Hadrian's Wall, have transformed historians' understanding of daily life on the distant frontier of the Roman Empire. Yet beyond their historical value, the tablets raise a series of fascinating technological questions, particularly regarding the surprisingly durable Roman ink used to write them. The tablets themselves are deceptively simple objects. Each one is made from thin slices of wood, often birch, alder, or oak, cut into sheets only about 1 to 3 millimeters thick. They resemble modern postcards more than traditional inscriptions. Roman scribes would write on them with ink using a reed pen, then fold or bundle them for transport. Under ordinary conditions, organic materials such as thin wood and ink would decay rapidly. In most archaeological environments, wooden documents rarely survive longer than a few decades. Yet at Vindolanda, more than 1,700 tablets have been recovered since systematic excavations began in the 1970s. Some of them still preserve legible writing after nearly 2,000 years underground. The remarkable preservation is partly explained by the unusual soil conditions of the site. Vindolanda sits in a waterlogged environment rich in clay, where oxygen is extremely limited. Without oxygen, the bacteria that normally destroy organic materials cannot function effectively. As a result, the wooden tablets remained sealed in an anaerobic layer of mud. However, even this explanation does not fully account for the survival of the writing itself. In many ancient manuscripts written with ink, such as papyri from Egypt or parchment manuscripts from the medieval period, the ink often fades or dissolves long before the writing surface decays. Yet the Vindolanda texts, written with a relatively simple carbon-based ink, remain astonishingly visible. Scientific analysis of the ink has revealed that it was primarily composed of carbon black, mixed with a binder such as gum arabic and diluted with water. On the surface, this formula appears straightforward and almost primitive. Carbon ink was widely used throughout the ancient world, including in Egypt, Greece, and later medieval Europe. However, the ink on the Vindolanda tablets displays an unusual stability and clarity that has puzzled researchers. Even when the wooden surfaces have partially degraded, the thin black strokes of Roman handwriting can still be detected, sometimes with the naked eye, and sometimes only through modern imaging technologies such as infrared photography and multispectral scanning. One of the most intriguing aspects of this ink technology is how effectively it adhered to the wooden surface. Wood is a notoriously difficult material for ink writing because its fibers can absorb liquid unevenly, causing ink to spread and blur. Yet the Vindolanda tablets show surprisingly crisp lines, suggesting that the Romans may have carefully prepared the wooden writing surfaces before applying ink. Some scholars propose that the wood was polished, scraped, or lightly coated with an organic sizing layer, possibly made from plant resins or animal glue. This treatment could have sealed the wood fibers and prevented the ink from soaking too deeply into the grain. However, direct chemical evidence for such a coating remains inconclusive, leaving the exact preparation method uncertain. Another mystery lies in the ink's long-term chemical stability. Carbon-based inks are generally known for their durability, but the Vindolanda examples appear unusually resistant to fading. For comparison, many medieval manuscripts written with iron gall ink, a later technology widely used across Europe, have suffered severe chemical corrosion, sometimes destroying the parchment they were written on. Iron gall ink contains acidic compounds that slowly degrade the writing surface over centuries. By contrast, if the simple carbon ink used by Roman scribes seems almost benign. The Vindolanda tablets demonstrate that this ancient formula could remain stable for nearly 2 millennia under favourable conditions. In this sense, Roman ink technology may have been more durable in the long term than some later medieval innovations. The tablets themselves contain a wide variety of texts that reveal the everyday realities of life at the edge of the empire. Some are military reports listing troop strengths and supply inventories. Others are personal letters written between officers, soldiers, and even family members. Among the most famous discoveries is a birthday invitation written by Claudia Severa to her friend Sulpicia Lepidina, often considered the earliest surviving handwritten Latin document by a woman. The message, although written in elegant cursive script, demonstrates not only literacy, but also a surprisingly personal and emotional tone. Such documents offer a rare glimpse into the human side of Roman frontier life. Archaeological excavations at Vindolanda have been ongoing for decades, with each new digging season revealing additional fragments of tablets. The first major discoveries occurred in 1973, when archaeologist Robin Burley and his team uncovered hundreds of wooden writing tablets preserved in deep anaerobic layers beneath the fort. Since then, continued excavations have expanded the collection to well over 1,700 pieces, with researchers estimating that many more may still lie buried beneath unexplored sections of the site. Each discovery adds new pieces to the puzzle of how the Roman administrative system functioned along its northern frontier. The existence of such a large archive also raises intriguing questions about Roman record-keeping practices. The tablets were apparently discarded after use, thrown into ditches or used as packing material during reconstruction phases of the fort. Yet the sheer volume of documents suggests that written communication played a central role in the daily operations of the Roman military. Orders, supply requests, and personal correspondence were all transmitted through handwritten messages. This level of written bureaucracy implies a surprisingly literate military culture, challenging earlier assumptions that most Roman soldiers were illiterate. Despite decades of research, many aspects of the Vindolanda tablets remain mysterious. How were the wooden surfaces prepared for writing? What exact formula allowed Roman ink to remain readable after nearly 2,000 years? And how widespread was this technology across the Roman Empire? The Vindolanda tablets reveal a remarkable combination of materials, science, chemistry, and communication systems in the Roman world. Beneath the mud of northern Britain, the voices of Roman soldiers and their families were preserved not in stone monuments, but on thin wooden sheets written with an extraordinarily durable black ink. Nearly 2,000 years later, those words still survive, offering a glimpse into everyday Roman life while leaving behind a profound mystery about the technological sophistication of the ancient world. How do you think the Romans created an ink that could survive for nearly 2,000 years on fragile wood? Was it a lost technology, or simply a clever use of natural materials? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Altamira cave paintings in northern Spain are often described as one of the greatest artistic achievements of prehistoric humanity. Yet they also represent one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. Located near Santillana del Mar in the region of Cantabria, the cave was first brought to scientific attention in 1879, when Spanish nobleman and amateur archaeologist Marcelino Sanz de Sautuola and his young daughter Maria noticed strange red and black figures covering the ceiling of the cave's main chamber. What they had discovered would later become known as the Sistine Chapel of prehistoric art. Today, scientific dating methods such as radiocarbon analysis and uranium-thorium testing suggest that many of the paintings were created between approximately 14,000 and 36,000 years ago, say during the Upper Paleolithic period. Yet despite decades of research, the techniques used by these ancient artists continue to challenge modern understanding of prehistoric technology. The most famous images at Altamira depict large bison painted across the cave's ceiling, some stretching nearly 2 meters in length. Unlike the simple line drawings often associated with early cave art, these animals were created using a remarkably sophisticated technique known as polychrome painting, meaning that multiple pigments were combined to produce shading and depth. Archaeological analysis shows that prehistoric artists used hematite-rich red ochre, manganese oxide, and charcoal, sometimes mixing these minerals with water or animal fat to produce different tones. The painters did not merely apply colour in flat shapes. Instead, they layered pigments and blended shades to produce subtle gradients that imitate the curves of muscles and the texture of fur. In several cases, microscopic analysis has revealed multiple overlapping pigment layers, suggesting deliberate artistic planning rather than spontaneous drawing. For comparison, many early Neolithic artworks thousands of years later still relied on single-colour pigments and simple outlines. The complexity at Altamira therefore raises a provocative question. How did Paleolithic humans develop such advanced artistic techniques so early in human cultural history? Another remarkable aspect of the paintings is the way the artists used the natural contours of the cave ceiling to create three-dimensional effects. The limestone surface inside Altamira contains numerous natural bulges and cracks formed by geological processes over tens of thousands of years. Rather than ignoring these irregularities, the painters incorporated them directly into their artwork. A raised section of rock might become the powerful shoulder of a bison, while a shallow depression might form the curve of an animal's belly. When illuminated by flickering torchlight, these features create the illusion that the animals are moving across the ceiling. Modern digital scans conducted in the early 21st century have confirmed that many figures align precisely with natural rock formations, suggesting that prehistoric artists carefully studied the cave surfaces before beginning their work. Such spatial awareness implies an advanced understanding of visual perspective that rivals techniques used by much later civilizations. However, perhaps the most astonishing mystery of Altamira lies not only in how the paintings were created, but in how they survived. Some of the pigments remain vivid and clearly visible after tens of thousands of years, an extraordinary level of preservation for ancient artwork. In fact, when the cave was first studied by scientists in the late 19th century, the colours appeared so fresh that many scholars refused to believe they were genuinely prehistoric. Several prominent archaeologists initially accused Sautuola of fabricating the paintings or commissioning modern artists to decorate the cave. It was not until 1902, after similar Paleolithic paintings were discovered in caves across France, that the scientific community finally acknowledged Altamira as authentic. The skepticism itself illustrates just how surprisingly well preserved the pigments were. The durability of the colours has become one of the central scientific puzzles surrounding Altamira. Laboratory studies show that many pigments were derived from iron oxide minerals such as hematite, which are chemically stable and resistant to fading. Yet mineral stability alone cannot fully explain the exceptional preservation observed in the cave. Some paintings still display clear tonal contrasts between red, brown, and black pigments, despite exposure to thousands of years of humidity, mineral deposition, and geological change. In comparison, many ancient murals from historical civilizations only 2,000 or 3,000 years old, including Roman wall paintings and Egyptian tomb art, have faded dramatically or suffered extensive pigment loss. The fact that Altamira's colours have endured for more than 10 times that length of time suggests that additional factors may be involved. One possibility involves the unique microclimate inside the cave. Altamira maintains a remarkably stable environment, with temperatures hovering around 13 to 14 degrees Celsius and humidity levels remaining consistently high but relatively constant. This stable climate reduces the expansion and contraction of mineral surfaces, preventing pigments from flaking away over time. Geological surveys conducted in the late 20th century also revealed that the cave walls contained fine layers of calcite that gradually formed over the paintings, creating a thin protective film. This mineral coating may have acted as a natural sealant, shielding the pigments from external chemical reactions. Even so, some researchers believe that the prehistoric artists themselves may have contributed to the longevity of the colours through unexpectedly advanced pigment preparation techniques. Chemical residue analysis has detected traces of organic substances within certain pigment samples, raising the possibility that ancient painters mixed minerals with animal fat, plant oils, or natural binders. Such mixtures would function similarly to the binding agents used in later tempera or oil painting, helping pigments adhere more securely to rock surfaces. If this hypothesis is correct, it would mean that Paleolithic artists possessed an early understanding of material chemistry thousands of years before the emergence of agriculture or metallurgy. Archaeological excavations in and around Altamira have also uncovered stone tools, pigment grinding stones, and fragments of ochre, indicating that the cave may have served as a specialized artistic or ceremonial space. Excavations carried out throughout the 20th century, particularly those led by archaeologist Hugo Obermeier and later Spanish research teams, revealed layers of occupation debris dating back tens of thousands of years. These findings suggest that multiple generations of Paleolithic communities may have returned to the cave repeatedly, perhaps adding new paintings over time. Radiocarbon testing of associated materials has confirmed that the artistic activity likely spanned several millennia, making Altamira not a single moment of creation, but a long-term cultural project. Even after more than 1 century of research, Altamira still raises many unanswered questions. Why were the paintings created deep inside a dark cave? How did prehistoric artists paint such detailed images with only torchlight? And why have the pigments survived for tens of thousands of years while many later artworks have faded? Altamira remains a remarkable prehistoric masterpiece, reminding us that early humans may have possessed greater artistic skill and knowledge than we once believed. The glowing bison on the cave ceiling continue to puzzle scientists even today. How do you think prehistoric artists managed to create colours that survive for tens of thousands of years? Tell us your theory in the comments below. The Dead Sea Scrolls are widely considered one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Hidden for nearly 2,000 years in caves overlooking the shores of the Dead Sea, these fragile manuscripts have reshaped historians' understanding of ancient religion, culture, and technology. Their story began in the year 1947, when a Bedouin shepherd searching for a lost goat threw a stone into a cave near the ancient settlement of Qumran and heard the sound of breaking pottery. Inside were tall clay jars containing rolled parchments wrapped in linen. What initially appeared to be simple fragments of ancient writing soon revealed itself to be a collection of extraordinary scale. Over the following decade of excavations, archaeologists explored 11 caves and uncovered more than 900 manuscripts and roughly 25,000 fragments. These texts include some of the oldest known copies of books from the Hebrew Bible, as well as previously unknown religious writings, community rules, hymns, and commentaries dating from approximately the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE. While the religious importance of the scrolls has attracted enormous attention, researchers quickly realized that another mystery lay within the materials themselves. The scrolls demonstrated levels of technological sophistication that seemed remarkably advanced for their time. The parchment on which many texts were written, for example, revealed a surprising chemical composition. Scientific studies conducted in the 21st century showed that the surface of some scrolls had been treated with a mineral coating made of sulfur, sodium, and calcium salts. Even more puzzling, the particular mixture of minerals used in this coating does not match the natural geology surrounding Qumran. This suggests that the ancient scribes either imported specialized materials from distant regions or developed a deliberate chemical preparation process. Such treatments may have improved the parchment's durability and created a smooth writing surface that allowed ink to adhere evenly. In effect, the scroll makers may have engineered a specialized writing material more than 2,000 years ago. Yet perhaps the most intriguing technological mystery of the Dead Sea Scrolls lies not in the parchment, but in the ink itself. The stability of the ancient writing is almost unbelievable when compared with most historical manuscripts. Many medieval documents written only 800 or 900 years ago show severe fading, chemical corrosion, or ink bleeding into the fibers of the page. By contrast, numerous Dead Sea Scroll fragments, despite being roughly 2 millennia old, retain lettering that remains strikingly dark and legible. Even under high magnification, the ink lines appear crisp and well-defined. This remarkable preservation has fascinated chemists, historians, and material scientists for decades. Laboratory analysis using techniques such as X-ray fluorescent spectroscopy and Raman spectroscopy has revealed that the primary component of the ink is carbon, most likely produced from finely ground soot or charcoal. Carbon-based inks were known in antiquity, but the ink used on the Dead Sea Scroll appears unusually refined. Instead of penetrating deeply into the parchment fibers as many inks do, the writing rests mainly on the treated surface layer of the parchment. This suggests that the scribes intentionally combined carbon pigment with organic binders, such as plant gums, to produce a thin, stable coating. The result behaved almost like a microscopic layer of paint rather than a liquid dye. Comparisons with other ancient writing systems make the durability of this ink even more remarkable. Papyrus manuscripts from ancient Egypt, some dating to similar periods, often show heavy fading or fragmentation. Roman ink formulas recorded by classical writers sometimes included iron compounds, which can gradually corrode the writing surface over centuries. In medieval Europe, the widespread use of iron gall ink eventually caused many manuscripts to deteriorate because the acidic mixture slowly ate through parchment pages. The Dead Sea Scroll ink, however, avoided this destructive chemistry. Instead, its carbon composition proved chemically stable over extremely long periods. Evidence also indicates that more than one ink formula may have been used among the scrolls. Some fragments show slight variations in mineral traces, suggesting that scribes experimented with different mixtures or obtained materials from different workshops. In certain manuscripts, headings or corrections appeared darker than the main body text, implying that multiple ink batches were applied during the writing process. These subtle differences hint at a surprisingly sophisticated scribal tradition, capable of adjusting writing materials depending on the purpose of the manuscript. One of the most famous scrolls demonstrating this durability is the nearly complete Isaiah scroll, discovered in Cave 1 at Qumran. Measuring approximately 7 meters in length when unrolled, the manuscript contains over 50 columns of text written more than 2,000 years ago. Despite its age, the lettering remains extraordinarily clear, allowing scholars to compare it with modern versions of the same biblical text. The consistency of the writing across the entire scroll suggests that the ink maintained its chemical stability from the beginning of the manuscript to the end. Such uniformity would have been difficult to achieve without a carefully prepared ink mixture. Archaeological excavations around Qumran have also uncovered inkwells, writing tables, and rooms believed to have served as scribal workshops. These discoveries support the idea that a community of trained scribes once lived and worked in the settlement, copying religious texts with remarkable precision. If these scribes indeed produced the scrolls locally, they would have possessed a highly organized writing culture involving standardized materials, disciplined training, and strict copying methods. The ability to produce hundreds of manuscripts using stable ink formulations suggests a level of technological knowledge rarely associated with small desert communities of the ancient world. Another layer of mystery appears in the case of the famous Copper Scroll, a unique text discovered in Cave 3. Unlike the parchment scrolls written in ink, this document was engraved directly into thin sheets of copper. The metal had corroded so heavily that researchers in 1955 were forced to cut the scroll into strips using precision tools before it could be read. The fact that this single scroll was inscribed on metal rather than parchment raises new questions about the range of writing technologies known to the ancient scribes. Ultimately, the Dead Sea Scrolls are far more than ancient religious writings. They reveal a surprising level of technological skill in the ancient world, from advanced parchment treatments to remarkably stable ink formulas and an organized scribal tradition. Even after more than 70 years of research, scientists continue to study the fragments using modern imaging and chemical analysis, uncovering new details about how these manuscripts were created. Yet many questions remain. How did ancient scribes develop ink capable of lasting more than 2,000 years? Where did they gain the knowledge to prepare specialized writing materials? And why did this technology later disappear? For now, the Dead Sea Scrolls remain both a priceless archaeological discovery and an enduring technological mystery. How do you think ancient people were able to create ink that could survive for more than 2,000 years in such a harsh desert environment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. More than 17,000 years ago, deep within the limestone hills of southwestern France, ancient humans created one of the most astonishing artistic achievements in human history: the paintings inside what we now call the Lascaux cave. Discovered accidentally in 1940 by 4 teenagers and their dog near the village of Montignac in the Dordogne region, the cave revealed a hidden world preserved for millennia. Inside were more than 600 painted figures and nearly 1,500 engravings depicting animals such as horses, aurochs, deer, ibex, and mysterious symbols whose meanings remain unknown. At first glance, these paintings appear to be simple prehistoric drawings, yet decades of archaeological research have revealed something far more extraordinary. The people who created them possessed artistic and technical abilities that seem far more advanced than previously believed for the Upper Paleolithic period. One of the most remarkable and still partly unexplained aspects of the Lascaux paintings is the extremely sophisticated painting and colour mixing techniques used by prehistoric artists. Scientific analyses conducted during several archaeological investigations, including pigment studies in the 1950s, spectrographic examinations in the 1980s, and more recent microscopic analyses in the 21st century, revealed that the colours were not randomly applied natural earth. Instead, the artist carefully selected mineral pigments such as hematite for red tones, neomanganese dioxide for deep black, and goethite and limonite for yellow and brown shades. These minerals had to be collected from different geological sources, sometimes located dozens of kilometers away from the cave itself. Researchers estimate that some of the pigment used in Lascaux may have been transported from deposits over 20 to 30 kilometers away, suggesting an organized effort to obtain specific materials rather than simply using whatever was nearby. Even more astonishing is how these pigments were prepared. Archaeologists examining residue samples discovered that the minerals had been ground into extremely fine powders, in some cases measuring only a few microns in particle size. Achieving such fine grinding would have required repeated crushing and grinding using stone tools, a process that could take hours for even a small amount of pigment. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that creating powders of similar fineness using primitive tools requires remarkable patience and technical knowledge. Yet the prehistoric artists of Lascaux not only produced these pigments, but also mixed them in complex ways to create a wide range of tones and shading effects. Chemical traces suggest that pigments may have been combined with animal fat, water, clay, or plant-based binders, though the exact formula remains uncertain. This raises an intriguing question. How did people living in the Stone Age develop such precise control over mineral chemistry? Another fascinating aspect of the painting technology at Lascaux is the apparent use of primitive spray painting techniques. Some of the colour patterns and soft edges seen in the artwork indicate that pigment was blown onto the cave walls, likely through hollow bones or reeds functioning as early airbrush tools. Archaeologists have discovered hollow bird bones and tubular objects in nearby Paleolithic sites that may have served exactly this purpose. When researchers recreated this technique experimentally, they found that blowing powdered pigment through a hollow tube can produce remarkably even coatings and gradients, similar to modern spray paint. This discovery suggests that prehistoric artists were not merely painting with brushes or fingers, but were actively experimenting with advanced methods of pigment application that allowed them to cover large surfaces quickly and create subtle shading. The level of artistic sophistication becomes even clearer when examining the famous Hall of the Bulls, one of the largest chambers in the cave. Here, Enormous images of aurochs, the now extinct wild ancestors of modern cattle, stretch across the walls, some reaching lengths of more than 5 meters, making them among the largest prehistoric paintings ever discovered. The colors used in these images are not flat or monotone. Instead, they show deliberate shading and layering that give the animals a sense of volume and movement. In several cases, the painters use darker pigments to emphasize outlines and muscles, while applying lighter tones within the bodies of the animals. Modern art historians often compare this technique to early forms of chiaroscuro, the method of using light and shadow to create depth that would not appear in European painting until thousands of years later during the Renaissance. Archaeological excavations conducted in and around the cave throughout the 20th century have uncovered additional evidence that the painting process was carefully organized. Researchers found stone grinding tools, pigment fragments, and containers made of shells or stone, which may have been used to store prepared colors. Some of these artifacts were discovered during excavations led by archaeologist Henri Breuil in the mid-20th century, while later studies using modern scanning technology revealed microscopic pigment residues embedded in the cave floor. These findings suggest that Lascaux functioned almost like a prehistoric art workshop, i.e., where materials were prepared before the paintings were created. What makes this even more mysterious is the environment in which these paintings were produced. Many of them are located hundreds of meters inside the cave, in areas that receive absolutely no natural light. To paint such detailed and colourful images in total darkness, prehistoric artists would have needed reliable illumination. Archaeologists discovered evidence of stone lamps fueled by animal fat, which could produce a small but steady flame. However, these lamps would have provided only limited light and would have filled the enclosed cave with smoke. Despite these harsh conditions, the artists managed to paint large, complex scenes with astonishing precision. Some paintings are even located on ceilings several meters above the cave floor, suggesting that the painters may have constructed wooden scaffolding or climbed natural rock formations to reach these surfaces. Another remarkable feature of the Lascaux paintings is the way artists used the natural contours of the cave walls to enhance the realism of the images. Bulges in the rock were incorporated into the shapes of animals' bodies, while cracks and ridges were used to define outlines or movement. This technique creates a subtle three-dimensional illusion, making the animals appear almost alive when illuminated by the flickering light of a stone lamp. Some researchers believe that this interaction between light, shadow, and the uneven cave surfaces may have created a sense of motion, as if the animals were moving across the walls. Despite decades of study, many mysteries of Lascaux remain unsolved. How did prehistoric people develop such advanced pigment techniques? And why were these paintings created deep inside a dark cave? Some researchers believe the artwork was part of ritual or spiritual practices, possibly linked to hunting magic or shamanism, while others think the cave served as a sacred space for symbolism and early storytelling. What is certain is that the artists who created these paintings more than 17,000 years ago possessed remarkable skill and knowledge. Even today, the true purpose behind these ancient masterpieces remains partly a mystery. Do you think the paintings in Lascaux Cave were simply art, or could they carry a deeper mystery that we still don't understand today? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The discovery of the Sutton Hoo ship burial in 1939 stands as one of the most astonishing archaeological revelations ever made in Europe. Hidden beneath a grassy mound in Suffolk, England, archaeologists uncovered the ghostly imprint of a massive wooden ship nearly 27 meters long, buried more than 13 centuries ago during the early Anglo-Saxon period. Although the wood of the vessel had long since decayed in the acidic soil, the outline of the ship remained preserved through more than 2,000 iron rivets that once held its planks together. This remarkable find immediately transformed historians' understanding of early medieval Britain. Before Sutton Hoo was excavated, the Anglo-Saxon period was often portrayed as a cultural dark age, following the collapse of Roman rule. Yet the scale, complexity, and craftsmanship revealed within this burial site suggested something very different: a sophisticated society capable of advanced engineering, long-distance trade, and astonishing artistic achievement. Among all the mysteries surrounding Sutton Hoo, however, the most extraordinary lies in the treasure itself, particularly the intricate gold artifacts whose craftsmanship appears far ahead of its time. The ship burial is widely believed to have belonged to an elite ruler, possibly the East Anglian King Redwald, who ruled in the early 7th century. Archaeologists reached this conclusion because of the immense wealth deposited within the burial chamber, positioned at the centre of the ship. The chamber contained weapons, ceremonial objects, silver vessels from the Mediterranean world, and an array of luxurious personal ornaments. Yet what astonished researchers most was the sheer sophistication of the gold work. The Sutton Hoo treasure includes belt buckles, shoulder clasps, sword fittings, purse lids, and numerous decorative pieces crafted from high-purity gold and inlaid with garnets. These objects display a level of technical precision that seems almost impossible for craftsmen working more than 1,300 years ago without modern tools. One famous belt buckle from the site weighs over 400 grams of gold and is decorated with intricate interlocking animal patterns carved into its surface. Within the buckle's tiny compartments, gold walls barely thicker than a human hair form geometric cells designed to hold precisely cut gemstones. This technique, known as cloisonné, requires an extraordinary level of control. Modern experiments attempting to recreate Sutton Hoo jewellery have demonstrated just how difficult the process is. Even with modern magnification tools, jewelers struggle to reproduce the microscopic gold partitions and perfectly fitted garnet pieces that Anglo-Saxon craftsmen produced entirely by hand. The garnets themselves add another layer of mystery. Scientific analysis has revealed that many of the red stones used in Sutton Hoo ornaments likely originated thousands of kilometers away, possibly from mines in India or Sri Lanka. This discovery indicates that early medieval Britain was connected to trade networks stretching across Eurasia, linking northern Europe with regions far beyond the Mediterranean. Such long-distance exchange was previously believed to be rare in the 7th century. Yet Sutton Hoo provides physical evidence that luxury materials travelled enormous distances long before the age of global exploration. Each garnet had to be carefully cut into thin geometric shapes so that light would reflect through the stones and off the gold foil beneath them, producing a deep, glowing red colour. When placed side by side, hundreds of these tiny garnets formed shimmering surfaces that must have dazzled anyone who saw them in candlelight or sunlight. The level of precision required for this process raises a fundamental question. How did Anglo-Saxon craftsmen achieve such meticulous workmanship without advanced magnification or specialized cutting machinery? Some of the gold cells holding the stones measure only a few millimeters across, yet their edges remain astonishingly straight and symmetrical. The famous Sutton Hoo helmet provides another example of extraordinary craftsmanship. Constructed from iron and covered with decorative bronze panels, the helmet features stylized animal imagery and complex interlacing patterns. Its design combines artistic influences from Scandinavia, the British Isles, and even parts of continental Europe. When archaeologists first reconstructed the helmet from hundreds of fragments, they realized that it represented one of the most elaborate pieces of military equipment ever discovered from early medieval Europe. The helmet structure suggests a deep understanding of metallurgy and protective design. Although it was heavily corroded when found, modern reconstruction shows that the original object must have been both functional and visually striking, thus symbolizing the authority of the individual buried at Sutton Hoo. Beyond the treasure itself, the burial raises fascinating questions about engineering and ritual. Constructing a wooden ship nearly 27 meters long required advanced shipbuilding techniques. The vessel was built using clinker construction, a method in which overlapping wooden planks are fastened together with iron rivets to create a strong yet flexible hull. This style of shipbuilding is most famously associated with Viking ships that appeared centuries later, yet Sutton Hoo demonstrates that such technology already existed in Britain long before the Viking Age. Archaeologists believe the ship may have been hauled from a nearby river to the burial mound, possibly using wooden rollers and large teams of workers. Once positioned in the trench, the burial chamber was constructed at the centre of the vessel and filled with treasures before the entire structure was covered with earth to form a monumental mound visible from the surrounding landscape. The excavation itself is part of archaeological legend. In the summer of 1939, local landowner Edith Pretty invited archaeologist Basil Brown to investigate the mysterious burial mounds on her property. Brown carefully excavated one of the largest mounds and gradually uncovered the rivets that revealed the outline of the enormous ship. As the excavation progressed, archaeologists realized they were dealing with a discovery of international significance. The timing was dramatic. Only weeks later, the outbreak of World War II forced researchers to halt further work and hide the treasures in secure locations to protect them from bombing. Over the decades that followed, additional excavations and scientific studies continued to reveal new details about the burial and the society that created it. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Sutton Hoo is the absence of a surviving body. The acidic soil in the region dissolved almost all traces of human remains, leaving only faint chemical evidence that a person once lay in the burial chamber. Despite this absence, the wealth and scale of the grave leave little doubt that it belonged to one of the most powerful individuals in early medieval Britain. The treasures found within the ship not only demonstrate extraordinary artistic ability, but also challenge long-held assumptions about the technological and cultural capabilities of the Anglo-Saxon world. The gold objects in particular stand as masterpieces of early medieval craftsmanship, rivaling jewellery produced in far more famous ancient civilizations. Today, the Sutton Hoo artefacts are preserved in the British Museum and continue to intrigue researchers. Despite modern scientific analysis, one question remains. How did 7th century craftsmen achieve such remarkable precision in gold and gemstone work without modern tools? The Sutton Hoo burial remains a powerful reminder that ancient societies may have possessed skills far more advanced than we once believed. Share your thoughts in the comments below.